Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're converting all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? It's Faded Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Wednesday, September 17th, 259 days into the new year. We are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here. I saw that post earlier. Sunny, roasting, gates of hell, Burbank, California. That was a weird tweet. For KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your humble host, Jimmy Church. Big proud salute to the men and women in uniform all around the world fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us. Defending that Constitution and freedom of speech. Always, every day, think about that. What did I tweet the other day? Be kind, be nice. Life is short, and it is. Be kind, be nice. Yesterday went on Dr. J's new show, Researchers on a Mission, Rome. Had a great time. That was really cool. Thought about that today. It was so much fun to just sit. Ken, did F2BQ is for questions. Oh, that is a question. I can't answer that. You do. You want to follow us on Twitter, at JChurchRadio. That's where the action is. Hashtag DMRadioNet. It's flashing by right now. You got to have TweetDeck. Get TweetDeck. I use TweetDeck, by the way, everybody. I use the Chrome version in Chrome, so I'm able to just see it in Chrome. Then you can pull it off the page if you want and keep it separate, but it runs internally in Chrome. Very cool. That's what I do. That's what you should do. Simple, simple, simple. All right. Grant Cameron on tonight. 2012-2013 Researcher of the Year. Just talking to him, I was like, dude, what about 2014? Our dead guy birthday today is actor John Ritter. John Ritter, hilarious dude. I mean, one of the funniest ever. Born in 1948, died on September 11th, 2003, at the age of 54. As we all know, he played Jack Tripper on Three's Company, but he starred, and this is the thing, and this happened in 1987, this movie, but he starred in one of the greatest UFO ET films of all time. It was a little-known film, and if you haven't seen it, you gotta peep this one out. It's called Real Men with Jim Belushi. It is an unbelievable film. Funny, too. I mean, it is really funny. But the way that they deal with E.T. and UFOs and the CIA, Jim Belushi's the CIA guy, the way that they deal with it, it's funny and it's good. And for us, it's great. I mean, Ritter did so many things, and he was so funny, and he was great in so many things, a couple of series and stuff. He was great. He was really funny. But Real Men, put it on the table. It's a good movie. Great movie. In 2003, he felt ill on the set right here in Burbank, and he didn't feel right. So you would think they took him right across the street to St. Joe's, we call it here in Burbank, St. Joe's, which is, by all measures, one of the best hospitals in the world, period. Both of our daughters were born there, and it is just a great hospital. It's one of those you go into and you're just like, oh, man, when I'm sick, this is where I want to go. It's like that. I mean, it is a nice hospital. It's right across the street from where they're shooting on the set. They take him into St. Joe's, and they mistakenly treat him for a heart attack. And then he died from an aortic dissection, which was a tear in the wall of the aorta in his heart. And he died in the hospital at St. Joe's on September 11th, 2003. Crazy story. And that was 6 days before his 55th birthday. John Ritter. And all of us were just so shocked when that happened. But what a funny guy. And you know what? Of all things, he left us with Real Men. I don't know if you like Jim Belushi, but you will after you watch Real Men. He's really good in that. They're both unbelievably funny. Great movie. Follow us on Twitter, @JChurchRadio, #DMRadioNet, Facebook, YouTube. Everything's fade to black. You know what to do. Later tonight, I will open up the lines with Grant Cameron. He's joining us from Manitoba, Great White North, up there in Canada. Have him on at the bottom of the hour. Email throughout the show. Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. Last night, after Courtney Brown, weird thing happened. Now, after last Thursday with, the anniversary of 9/11 with Mike Berra and how heated things got, Mike not playing. I mean, his opinion, his belief is, it was just hijackings. Nothing happened. Buildings fell down on their own. Those were planes that hit the Pentagon. And that's the end of the story. Government didn't know anything about it. Well, maybe not. But that was it. And it got heated. So last night we bring on Courtney Brown, farsight.org. And Courtney, with his two remote viewers, Dick Allgaier and Daz Smith. Courtney's not an RV. Okay, he just runs Farsight, and sets all of this up. But the revelations that they saw, okay, that's what they saw. It's remote viewing. But I just got this email yesterday, a bunch of it, about how can that be when in reality, to me, it was exactly what everybody was arguing and debating last week with Berra. Courtney comes on. It was like weird. I was like, wow, strangeness. You can't win for losing, can you? It was bizarre to see everybody's reaction. And again, remote viewing for me. I would love to get Joseph McMoneagle on the show. I've reached out to him many, 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 many times to come on this show, and actually reached out to him way before Courtney. And but nonetheless, I would like to get McMoneagle on the show, and I want to learn. I want to learn. Remote viewing to me is real. That is some real stuff going down. It's frightening. It's so real. I've experienced it myself, and I've just got to say, there's something there. I want to learn some more. I want to get McMoneagle on the show, him and his wife. All right. So, yeah, I thought that was just totally bizarre. I got so much email on it, I'm not even going to read it tonight. I've got other stuff to go over. I saw this. Dave just tweeted Rupert Sheldrake is just on Joe Rogan, episode 550. Is that, I've looked at all of Rogan's stuff. I guess that is 550 3-hour shows. We're at $120, $130 here to get to 550. That's why Rogan's bald. That stuff is gray. But Rupert on the show. Wow. I can't wait to peep that out. I'm pimping somebody else's show, but Rogan does a good show, and I can only imagine what went down on that one. And yeah, I saw that like 5 times today, Dave. Everybody reminding me about that. I will check it out tonight. Anyway, okay, where are we? I do want to thank Method of Signaling. He's done a lot of really hard work for us over the last week, and we've got that new header up over at jimmychurchradio.com. But we have a treat that I think is just about ready. Today, we thought we were done, and I thought we were done. And then Walanda texts me. She says, "Did you miss something in that?" I said, "What?" "Oh, there's something missing." So we've got to get that fixed, and we'll have this last little tweak should be done, and I can't wait to whip this out in the world tomorrow. Man. I'm serious. Method. I can't thank you enough, but you are one talented cat. And I'm just going to leave it at that. He is, yes, Ken just said the effing master. That is one talented guy. Man. And everybody, all the Fader, all the stuff, everything that has come in, it's just incredible. Dale and Ken and Cheryl Lynn, and on and on and on and on. Everybody's just so talented. It's crazy. It's nuts. I want to use it all, too. Method freaks me out. Method is not of this earth, and we'll find out from where one day. But again, we will do that tomorrow. We'll whip it out. All right. Tonight, like I said, is Grant Cameron, 2013, 2012 Researcher of the Year. Tomorrow night, don't forget, open lines. That will be tomorrow. And next week, we've already got a few things set up. I will let the cat out of the bag on a couple of those when I read some emails when I come back. This is Fade to Black. Wednesday night, Grant Cameron. Shoot me an email to Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You got any questions for Grant? All you got to do is hashtag F2BQ. Hashtag F2BQ. That'll feed me direct. Keep it clean. Don't keep it clean. What I mean is, don't keep it wordy. Shoot me some questions from Grant. You got something for me, I'll do that too. It doesn't matter. This is Fade to Black. I'm your humble host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late-night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Yeah. How you doing? All right, welcome back. Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your humble host, extremely humble, Jimmy Church. What is shaking everybody? Ed Dame sounds exactly like Bruce Dern. From Ken Beck. Keith McDonald just tweeted, "Don't worry, Jimmy, show 1000 will still be here." Wow, 1000. Let's do the math on that. What's that, 10 years from now? Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Oh, let's see here. Okay, this came in from Facebook. This is from Roger. It says, "Hi. If our reality is based upon subatomic particle worlds and it follows quantum laws and principles, then if it were possible to move from one existing quantum state to another quantum possibility, why wouldn't that constitute interdimensional travel? It would indeed, and therefore that gives science, they have a definite target to aim for." That was deep. I should almost read that again. Here's another, this is an email from Richard. "Jimmy, I had to write to you. Here's the thing. I don't drive, so I have to get 2 buses to work each morning. It takes me around 2 hours. Anyway, I got the podcast app, so I decided I would download a couple of episodes to keep me going on my bus journey. So I downloaded the John B. Wells show, and also, good choice, and also episode 23 with George Hansen. Jimmy, the way the show has evolved is just incredible. I mean, you would know it was the same show because you are listening to the show every night. You don't notice the evolution. It was always good, my friend, but it keeps getting better." That's from Richard. And this is what I thought when I read that. I was like, dude, I can't imagine how bad that show 23 was. Oh, that must have been painful. Painful. I have no idea. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm so with you on that. I don't listen to any of the shows at all. I don't have the time, but I can't stand the sound of my voice. It just kills me. It's nails on a chalkboard. Can't do it. Can't, won't do it. Will not do it. But to go back to listen to episode 19, 18, 17, 16, 40, yeah. I'm so with you, Richard, and I'm glad you noticed, and I'm glad you're using the podcast to do that because you can do it, and you can do it in real time. Very cool. The podcast, if you haven't subscribed, it doesn't replace anything. It's just a supplement of everything we're doing here. YouTube stays the same. The live show tonight, every night, it will always be the same. Podcast is there for you to be mobile and to go and check things out and to have it on Kindle or whatever, any platform that you're using. So do subscribe, go over. It does help support the show somewhat, but we put a lot of effort into it. So please go and subscribe to the podcast. You know what? I didn't even mean to do that or say that. I just thought the email was cool because the contrast between episode 23 and episode 120 or episode 23 and 120. It's got to be insane. Just, oh no. Painful. This email's from Michael Hampton. He says, "Hi, Jimmy. Why does everybody start off, hi, Jimmy? Maybe I should just take that off. Hi, Jimmy. I'm a longtime listener of Fade to Black. I must have heard about 90% of the programs. I listen to you on YouTube because it is the most convenient way. I live in Hong Kong, so the live shows are sometimes not terribly convenient. It's so easy to convert the videos to MP3 files." Oh, really? Yeah, so much for the podcast for him. And I just listen and when I have the time. You probably have many people all over the world doing that, more than you can imagine. I am writing to suggest a new guest for your show. His name is Dr. Richard Allen Miller. He's the original Fox Mulder from the X-Files, and you will have a good idea of him. In fact, he was involved in creating that TV series, and several of the early episodes were based on his real-life experiences, working with the Defense Intelligence as part of the Navy. Well, Michael, check this out. Got some good news. On Monday, our guest is Richard Allen Miller. Yes. And I'm telling you right now, colorful doesn't describe this guy enough. He's done it all. He has literally done it all. But yes, he's part of the inspiration, not only with the X-Files, with Chris Carter. He was on set for that first season as the consultant, and he will be with us on Monday. And I truly cannot wait. It's going to be great. Let's see who else. Oh, next week, James Swagger just got back from Bosnia, the pyramids. So he's going to join us on Tuesday with a very special, exclusive report on the Bosnia pyramids. And I cannot wait. Keith McDonald just tweeted, "Wow, Richard Allen Miller, way cool." Yeah, I'm telling you right now, Richard Allen Miller. Okay, keep the guest requests coming. That's how it happens. Okay, just about every guest that's on this show is a request that comes from you. If I could book everybody and get it all done from all of the requests that come in, I don't know. We would have 50 people in a week. We can't do that, but certainly the ideas come from you, all of you Fadernauts and the family. So I'm serious too. Just email me, put it down, send it to Walanda, tweet it, Facebook it, get it to us, email, and we check everybody out. I did research today on probably 10 different guys, just wondering if they were up to snuff. Okay? All right. Check this out. Got a church rant. I didn't post this on the website, but check this out. This is about as disturbing as it gets. Well, at least for me. Maybe not for you. There's a Facebook now for rich people. That's right. A Facebook for rich people. It's called Netro with an N, Netropolitan. It cost $9,000 to apply. $3,000 a year. That's right. To join, new users have to pony up $9,000 for a membership fee, and then another $3,000 per year after that. If it seems like a joke, it's not. It's not some fictional thing. It's right there. Go look it up. Go check it out. And if you're yeah, oh man, if your bank account will allow that to happen, go sign up. It's 100% real. This is a quote. Check out the guy's name, too. It's 100% real. And I believe there is a need for an audience for this service, end quote, says James Tushy Peters, the founder. Should be Douchey. Tushy. Did I say that? James Tushy Peters. Tushy Peters, he's 48 years old, a composer and former conductor of the Minnesota Philharmonic Orchestra, said that he had trouble finding people who he could relate to on other social sites. I feel like I'm doing a comedy sketch. I gotta pull my pants up there, Walter. Okay, or Ken. That's just it's too much. And now check this out. Here's another quote. I saw a need for an environment where you could talk about the finer things in life without backlash. An environment where people could share similar likes and experiences. He said the hefty initiation fee ensures, and I'm quoting here, ensures that our membership remains exclusive. Members must be at least 21 years old and must register using their real names. Once in, they may form groups around common interests, will have access to post and status updates by all other users. They have no ads. The site is not indexed by search engines. And moderators are active at all times to police bad behavior, like spamming ads for your own business. Here's another quote. Please understand that Metropolitan is not a concierge service. Our member service associates will not book you a charter jet or find you tickets to a sold-out Broadway show. They exist solely to help members technically navigate and find their way around our social club. End quote. We view Metropolitan Club, it's metropolitan.club, in the same light as any country club out there. They have, and I'm quoting here, they have initiation fees and yearly dues for members. Metropolitan is an online country club focused on connecting members around the world. We believe there is a need for a community like this, and we are filling that need. End quote. Unbelievable. And this is where I'm coming from. When I see stuff like this, and I hear about it, I don't want to know. If it exists, let it exist somewhere, where I will never know about it. Because the $9,000 that somebody's going to pony up for this and the $3,000 a year, that's $12,000 to kick things off, and then $3,000 a year after that would pay for a lot of books in a school, pay for a lot of meals in a cafeteria for kids that can't afford to eat. Things like that. Really? The elitists? Really? Seriously, really? It boggles the mind. It absolutely messes with me. Hardcore. Man, I wish it were something I could do. Spam that site. Yeah, anyway. All right, now that I perked everybody up, let's get ready for Grant Cameron. Is everybody ready? I am. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your humble host, Jimmy Church, and I do mean humble. Metropolitan. Are you kidding me? Seriously. You know what the news source for that was? CNN. I'll be right back. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Stay with us, everybody. It's going to be a great night.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Yeah. How you doing? Man, I'm in a good mood. Great mood. Everybody ready? Is everybody ready? I need a shout out. What have I got to say? Bacon? I mean, seriously. Let's get this show cracking. Man, I bummed everybody out with that, didn't I? I really did. It bummed me out. Metropolitan Police. Absolutely. All right, let's get this going. Grant Cameron became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May 1975 with personal sightings of an object which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. The sightings occurred in Carmen, Manitoba, about 25 miles north of the Canadian-U.S. border. Hundreds of other people sighted the objects at the same time during a prolonged flap of sightings. He has lectured widely in Canada, Europe, and the United States on the 1975 Carmen flap and the Canadian government's early investigations into flying saucers, UFO disclosure, politics, the Rockefeller UFO initiative, the presidential UFO connection, the consciousness linked to UFOs, and recent research that indicates that the force behind the UFO phenomena is carrying out a plan of disclosure as to what UFOs are and why they are here. Cameron was instrumental in recovering all the UFO files inside the Clinton files at the Clinton Library in Little Rock, Arkansas. Over 10,000 pages were processed in the request. They show that the Clinton administration was very interested in the phenomena and actually tried to force out some of the hidden information to the public. He was awarded the International Researcher of the Year at the 2012 Leeds UFO Conference and the Researcher of the Year at the 2013 International UFO Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. I would like to humbly welcome our friend from the Great White North, Grant Cameron. Grant, how are you tonight, sir?
Just fine, Jimmy. I love that intro. You should be writing my stuff for me.
Hey, I'm for hire, brother. I am for hire. Yeah, the Great White North. Let me ask you this, Grant, and this isn't a UFO question, but there's a phenomenon between the United States and Canada. It's been going on for a long time. And I feel that, and we love our Canadian neighbors to the north, but the fact is we barely know you guys are there. And I say that with the kindness of heart in that you guys don't cause trouble. You guys are up there. You guys are cool, collected, and you're almost invisible. And that's a good thing. But on the other hand, us down here, we're loud, conceited, overly self-assertive, kind of like this show, actually. And so you guys see us in a different light than we see you. And there's like this thing that's going on between the two of us. It's kind of like this weird thing. And I think that Canadians in general think that maybe we have maybe a little disdain or a little distaste for all things Canadian, and we don't. And I think there's a little attitude when Americans go up to Canada, and it's not the same way. We love you guys, and I think if you only knew how much we love Canada, it would be a little different. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and there is a difference. I think what the main difference that I see is that Americans really don't get any Canadian TV, whereas most Canadians live right along the U.S. border, say within 60 miles of the border.
Sure.
And all our channels are American. So we see everything. We know as much about all your stations as you do because we get them all. And so I think that's the big divide, is that America is just basically sort of into themselves. They're into their politics. And it's not only Canada, but it would be almost any country in the world that a lot of Americans really wouldn't know, what goes on in most countries. They're sort of the news is basically American central type stuff where it's just talking about America. So I think we sort of see Americans as a little very sort of innovative, ahead of the game, but very stupid when it comes to anything outside their own country. They're sort of
yeah. I think you're being I think you're being kind right now too. You're being gentle, but well, you know what? Just thank goodness that we didn't win the gold medal in the Olympics, because it would have gone off the charts. And
yeah, but it is annoying because I mean Canada is a hockey country.
Yes,
and I'm in Winnipeg, which is the Jets just came back here 3 years. We got the professional team, the Winnipeg Jets. And we haven't made the playoffs yet. And when the tickets went for sale the first year, the season tickets, the whole arena sold out in 90 seconds. So we're a little upset when Los Angeles wins the Stanley Cup 2 out of 3 years. We're saying, like, I mean, most of these people don't know what ice is. Like,
right.
You know,
in Los Angeles, unfair. Yeah, right. Of all the cities, you know, I don't mind as much when it's Denver, when it's Colorado, or a northern city that appreciates snow and ice, but the Stanley Cup here in Los Angeles, that's a big bowl of wrong. It's just not right.
But it is an awesome team you guys have down there.
Yeah. You know, let me tell you what the facts are with that, and then we'll jump into some ufology. But let me tell you what the facts are. This is the hard truth. Now, you know, I was a sportscaster for years. And there's a phenomena here in L.A. We have a beautiful arena, the Staples Center. Everybody knows.
Yep.
And I don't know what capacity is there, but it's probably around 20,000. Yeah. And it sells out all of the Kings games are sold out. You can't forget about it. But what we don't have here in L.A. is we don't have 25,000 hockey fans. All 20,000. All 20,000 go to every single game, and they are all by themselves. And it is a fact. It's crazy because you don't. And people in LA, I mean, look, they know exactly what I'm talking about. This is Laker country. We have USC, we have UCLA. You know, the Clippers finally have done something, so there's other things to talk about. But we don't have a football team. There's no NFL here. And what we do have is we have the Kings and we have the Lakers and we have the Clippers. And it's a Lakers town. It's sort of the Clippers, sort of. The Clippers are more popular around the world and across the United States than they are here in Los Angeles. Trust me, it's a Lakers world. And I feel so bad for those Kings fans. They go and they win the Stanley Cup. They don't get a parade in downtown L.A. As a matter of fact, the day after the Stanley Cup is won, the headlines are gone. That's it. It's over. And so you can relish in that moment. How's that? Does that make you feel a little better?
That makes you feel better. You bet.
Oh, right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, plus we took Wayne Gretzky from you, and that was just wrong, too.
Yeah. And, of course, he was one of these things where a lot of people didn't like him. You either liked him or you didn't like him.
Well, you know, he was still the greatest.
Oh yeah,
he was still the greatest, and
give it to him.
And that was a coup d'état that we pulled on that with checkbooks, and that just wasn't right either. All right, so let's move on. Most people have no clue what we're talking about now. Where do we start with Grant Cameron? Okay, let me start here. 2012, 2013 Researcher of the Year, out of Leeds in England and over here. That is, it's a field, ufology in general. It's a field that's small, but competitive, because the guys and gals that research are very, very good, and it's what they do professionally. And it's to get that in that league is pretty cool. It's the Academy Awards. So how did you feel different? Do you feel different? Do you think you're better than those other guys and gals?
I was kind of shocked when they came up with it, and I think some of it may have had to do with the document stuff I had done. I mean, when you look at Stanton Friedman and Jacques Vallée and some of these people, you're going like, I don't think I'm in that league.
Right.
But I am obsessed. I mean, I have been obsessed since 1975 when this thing sort of started. And it did encourage me when I did win these awards that, people are sort of recognizing it. And it does give you a lot more confidence and a little more incentive to go, although this is basically all I do now. I mean, I retired early so I could do this full time, because it's like you mentioned, a lot of researchers are very sort of hardworking. They work at it because most of us are obsessed. Most of us have fallen down this rabbit hole based upon something that's happened to us. The same as the experiencers who have had the experiencers. It changes your life when you see something, which happened to me. And it alters everything about what's going on. And so this was just an encouragement that, yes, you're on the right track. And if you've seen my recent research on consciousness and the alien disclosure plan and stuff, I think a lot of this is orchestrated. And I think with me, a lot of it, I'm starting to believe, was orchestrated, that the things that happened to me didn't happen by chance. I was given certain cues to do certain things, and I just followed that pattern. And I would say since I won I had this download experience in 2012 at the International UFO Congress the year before I won the award. And I would say that after that, I'd been at it since 1975, so I had been at it for 35 years already. But when I had this download experience, since that point, I would say the ideas, the material that has come to me is like a waterfall on steroids. It's just unbelievable compared to my first 35 years. I've done way more in the last 5 years. It's almost like I suddenly figured out the answer to the question I wanted in 1975. What is it? What did I saw? It was like everything seemed to come together. And so it's moving very fast for me. I have all sorts of manuscripts all going, piles of ideas. Everything seems to fit together well. So it's done well. And those awards did sort of fit into the pattern of things really starting to take off.
Well, plus you're a very likable, approachable guy, and that I think is rare. I don't see the ego in you, but I'll say this: Did they give you a plaque? Do you have like a statue?
Yeah, they gave me a little statue. I've hidden it away.
Oh,
none of my family have seen it.
No. This is what you do, Grant. Yeah. Every time you speak, you go up to that podium with that thing and you plop that thing down. That's what you do. You just go clunk. All right, I'm here to speak. That's what you do.
I'm one of these people who have never seen anything that I did. I don't never listen to anything that audios, videos that I've done. Once I write something, I never read it again. I'm one of those type of people. You see that sometimes with actors and actresses where they can't watch themselves on screen or listen to themselves or whatever.
Right,
I'm one of those people where I'm driven to do this stuff, but I have this sort of obsession where I really don't like the attention or that kind of stuff. I just want to get the sort of the message out because I think that's part of my role. Whatever's happened to me is, and I realize, I'm getting on in age that everybody wants to do something with their life. Somebody wants to achieve something. You want to get something out there. And I think this is the main role that I've been given because when it started for me, I was in university. And I can still remember being in university. I had religion as a major. I had political studies. I was studying the Soviet government and stuff like this, and I was interested in it. It was all very fun and good, but I was going like, what the heck am I going to do? This is absolute garbage. There's no way in the world I could ever make a dime studying this stuff. And when I saw my UFO, my life completely changed. I said, this is what I got to do. It was like I was just totally obsessed, and everything seemed to make sense. So I've sort of just chased it. So a big part of the world of UFOs to me is to figure it out and then to get the information across, because I know so many researchers who have died since I started. And I know that my son is not really interested, although he's had some weird experiences. Nobody in my family is really interested. And so it would come down to the fact that if I died tomorrow, everybody would be looking for the will, where's the money, and all my files would go in the garbage. So I know I have to get out what I've got.
Right.
Because I've seen so many researchers where, whether it's Len Stringfield or some of these people where where's their files? They must have talked to a lot of people, kept interviews off the record, never mentioned them. And, I would hate to see all my stuff sort of disappear.
Yeah, you're right about that. When James McDonald or Keel or, even like Hynek, that there's stuff that we don't know about. There must be mountains of stuff out there. Wendell Stevens, I just had Joe Fex on the show the other day, and Alejandro Rojas and Open Minds were talking about that stuff. But these researchers, they spend their lives 30, 40 years doing this, and they have stuff. Look at Clifford Stone. Clifford Stone has probably got 5 trucks worth of stuff on his property.
Sure. And that's a discussion that I've had, like with Paula Harris. Paula said to me, where are your files going when you die? And I said, well, I really don't know. And this is one of the big discussions that we have when we talk is, where do you send it? Do you send it to Roswell? Do you send it to MUFON? Where do you send it so that people will actually read it? How's the best way to get it across? And I think the answer now is the internet, is to get as much as you can on the internet and not rely on libraries, because I may go to a presidential library, or I may go down to University of Arizona and look at James McDonald's files. I'll go to the Reagan Library in Simi Valley there and look at his files, but nobody else is going to do that. So even if it goes to an archives at a university or somewhere, nobody's going to go look at those files. And that's the key thing, is that everybody wants to know what the answer is. And I think I have, in my life, discovered a number of the answers. And I think it's incumbent upon me to find the best way to get it out there so that people can know what's going on, because people are all trying to seek the answer. And so when I get into research, like when I'm speaking this coming Saturday at the Close Encounters Research Organization, Yvonne Smith's group, I consider these people the chosen. She wrote a book called The Chosen, the experiencers, the contactees. I say these are the most important people in the world. These are the people who are playing in the Super Bowl.
Right.
Because the UFO story, if you understand the UFO story and the implications of this story, it is the most important story. It is like the Super Bowl of all stories. And these people got picked to play in that game. And a lot of them will sort of whine and complain about the pain and all this sort of stuff. And I always remind them when I speak to them, I say, you guys, if there's ever going to be an answer, you guys are the ones that have the answer, because the President of the United States knows. The Secretary of Defense will know a certain amount. Any general with a 4-star, with a unified command will know. A number of people will know, but they aren't going to tell you because it's classified, and they aren't going to tell you. The only people that have the answers, who are going to be willing to talk, are these people who claim to have been on the ship, who have interacted with the UFO phenomena. Because you can look at sightings all you want. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to learn anything. You're going to see there's so many green ones, so many fast ones, so many slow ones, so many triangles, so many circular things. That tells you nothing. It's like standing at the top of a skyscraper and watching these little tiny things move around on the streets. It's not until you take the elevator down and you go like Travis Walton did and flag one of these things down and get inside these little objects, you're going to find out who's flying these things, what are they doing here, and what do they want. And the experiencers, the contactee people, as I told them, I said, you may not know what role you're playing in the Super Bowl, but you have been picked because your parents were probably picked. You've been picked. Your children are going to be picked. You've been picked for a reason, and the answer lies there. So I'm just fascinated with these people, and I try to put as much of this material, and I've gotten in trouble a couple of times over people saying to me, people will do this to me. They'll say, one guy told me, for example, he had talked to 2 U.S. presidents, and they told him this, and he was asking these questions about the Holloman film and sort of stuff. And I leaked this. And then he wrote me back and he said, can't keep your damn mouth shut and this sort of stuff. And basically my answer back was, well, there's 12 of you guys, and I call them sort of the Avery, these guys, sort of intelligence guys who have sort of an interest in the phenomena. They had at some point in their career, they've sort of bumped into the UFO phenomena. And so they're working among themselves and they're exchanging material, but they're not going to tell anybody either. So it's like the second control group. And I said, well, what's the point? I mean, if you guys figure it out, who cares? I mean, so I'll talk, and I've had a number of people who've cut me off say, you can't keep your damn mouth shut. And yet what they'll do is they'll tell you something and then say you have to keep it secret. And so now when people do that, I say, number one, I'm going to tell everybody, from now on, you tell me before you tell me the secret what it is. You can't tell me the secret and then tell me to keep my mouth shut.
Right.
Because this doesn't help anybody. I mean, we have a lot of people who have a lot of very important information that they've talked to presidents, they've talked to high-level intelligence people, they've got answers, but they're not telling anybody. And that's to me is a tragedy, that people need to know this kind of stuff, that this is for real, and there are people who know what's going on.
Now, I'm going to jump to Reagan real quick because you just brought up the Reagan Library. But I do, and you and I were talking about how we were going to try to, keep this somewhat cohesive tonight. So we're going to start with Obama and work backwards. We'll do a segue into Hillary. We'll do a left turn, and then we'll come back, and then we'll continue backwards. But you just brought up the Reagan Library, and it's right down the street here from the studio. I have been there. Impressive place.
Yes.
He was the reason why I voted. I mean, it's truly a great, if not the greatest president that we've ever had. You don't have to be a Democrat or independent or anything to appreciate what he did and how he led this country. That being said, can I go to the Reagan Library and poke through material? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. But the material...
But how is that... Okay, well, let me... I'm going to jump in.
Go ahead.
How is that possible? Do I go there? Do I have to have press credentials? Do I have to whip out my credentials? Or can anybody just go in and request to do this?
Anybody can go in. The thing that has to be open. So what I do as a researcher is what I did with the Clintons is because I had 1,000 pages from the Clinton Library before they built the library. A president has 5 years after he leaves the office to use his files to do memoirs and do whatever. And then the files become subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And so that's when they start opening the files. But the way they open the files is they only open the files according to what people request. So if you have an interest in UFOs, and that's what happened to the Clinton Library, is of the first 18 requests that they filed, FOIA requests, when they opened the library, 11 of them had to do with UFOs. And, of course, this just like the Washington Post wanted to know what was going on, Associated Press, like what's with all these UFO Reagan stuff. And there was even a big group of lawyers in Washington, D.C. who were very upset about this because they wanted Hillary's files because Hillary was running for president in 2008, and this is when the files were started to be open. And they wrote a letter, and they actually filed a lawsuit against the Clinton Library and said, this is a total waste. You guys are wasting your time. You're doing this UFO stuff. And so I wrote these high-powered lawyers in Washington, and I said, look, the way it works is first come, first serve. I filed before you. That's why these things came out and go to hell. And they never replied back to me. But that's the way it works. So whatever I've tried to get out of the Reagan Library, I've tried to go to the science director, try to get his files. We filed a number of UFO requests. But you'll see it's very good to go into these libraries because the archivists at the library, you sort of think, well, they're working for the government, they're going to cover this stuff up. And basically they're not. They're basically just interested. That's why they're archivists. They're interested in history. So you can go in there to the Reagan Library and you can say, can I see the stuff that's been filed on UFOs? And they will they'll know where it is, and you'll sit down, you have to get your little card, you go through a little formality and this sort of stuff. And they'll sit there and bring you box after box after box. And a lot of it will be in other files. So you have to sort of look for it. But it was actually the archivist who found for me, if you remember, Reagan made this famous speech about the alien invasion at the UN. He talked about how the world would unite if we were facing a threat from an alien nation. And I remember I was in the library and I was looking for various stuff. And you can sit there for days because there is almost no UFO files in any of the presidential libraries. It's classified. It's kept in different files. It's not in those kind of files. So I was there, and I was basically looking for something. And then I said to them, is this Reagan's writing? And I remember it was one of these synchronicity things where the archivist said, no, here. And she flipped through a couple of files and she showed me this thing. And it was Reagan's handwritten notation on the file that he had made for the 87 UN speech. He had put this alien invasion remark in the speech. And the speechwriter had taken it out. And Reagan writes in his handwriting. This was what she showed me. She said, no, here's Reagan's handwriting. It said, oh, by the way, could you put my fantasy back in? How the world would unite if faced with a threat from an alien nation. And I about fell over. This is like 5 minutes before the library closed. And I'm looking at this. I could not believe it. She had actually showed me this thing. So then I posted on my site. And, of course, it basically confirms in Reagan's handwriting that he wanted this in his speech. They took it out. He put it back in. And then he would go into different ad lib speeches. So I would go to the various speeches where he talked about the alien invasion. So you'll find those speeches there. But in terms of UFO stuff, you will not find that much except for the Clinton Library. And even there, there's sort of a scandal has occurred there in that when he was president, there's only 2 agencies inside the White House that are you can get documents while he's in the White House. And one is the Office of the Science Advisor. And so when I heard someone had filed for the UFO documents, and the Rockefeller Initiative, which you had mentioned, this is this story where Lawrence Rockefeller, the big philanthropist, billionaire, Rockefeller brother, he's the one that has the philosophy degree from Princeton. He's the ecology guy. He has all the Teton forest, the ranches and the cabins and stuff like that. He's really into environment, into UFOs and stuff like that. And he goes and he decides he's going to get the president to disclose UFOs. So when he goes there, they cut him off at the pass, and the science advisor to President Clinton handles Rockefeller. So what happens is this correspondence goes back and forth between Rockefeller and the science advisor, and it's very open discussion about UFOs and Roswell and all this kind of stuff. So when I filed a Freedom of Information Act request while Clinton was in the office, I got 1,000 pages of documents from the Clinton Library, from this office's the science advisor to the president, who was Jack Gibbons. Anyway, when he leaves office, then you have the 5-year period where he gets to use his documents. They open the Clinton Library, and they start to file all these FOIAs. So I file 100 FOIAs because I know everybody that's involved. I know Hillary's involved. I know who's all involved, and I file for everybody's UFO files, and I put in 100 FOIA requests right up front about a month after. And that's why so many UFO files came out at the beginning, and why Associated Press and Washington Post and Fox News and everybody's trying to figure out why is all this UFO stuff coming out. And anyway, but then when I filed for all these 1,000 pages of documents from the Office of the Science Director, the Clinton Library said, well, we don't have them. We don't have those files. And I said, well, here, and I sent them the actual inventory of the files, all the document names and the dates and all this stuff. And they said, no, we don't have them. You have to go to the National Archives. So I go to the National Archives, go through the same procedure. They said, we don't have them either. And I said, well, you got to have them. So I file an appeal with the National Archives. National Archives comes back and they deny my request. So what the situation is, even though there's maybe 10,000 pages of UFO type related documents at the Clinton Library, the 1,000 pages of original documents that deal with the Rockefeller Initiative, this interesting story of Rockefeller trying to force the president to disclose the UFOs in 1993, 94, 95 are missing. Everybody says they don't have them. So the proposal I had, and I still will probably do this, is I'm going to send the documents to the Clinton Library and say, by the way, you're missing these files. And then they're in a real mess because they have to, what are they going to do with these? They have to file these documents. So I'm going to send the 1,000 pages of documents back and say, you're missing these files. I want them filed at the Clinton Library, and we'll see what happens.
This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are talking to Grant Cameron, live from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Now, before we get into, and we started to get ahead of ourselves, but we started talking about Reagan. I want to backpedal a little bit before we get into all of this presidential stuff, because we're going to do that beginning to end, and I want to do it in one chunk. I want to jump into the download experience, because I did watch one of your. By the way, I never listen to myself either. I can't do it. I cannot do it. I won't do it. I'm glad you don't. But I watched you speak somewhere, and it was immediately after the download experience. And you seemed, when you got up and you started to speak and you talked about it, it wasn't like the normal Grant. You seemed, is disturbed the right word? I think you were kind of distant. I mean, did it bother you that much? I mean, were you walking around all day long, just tripping out, for lack of a better word? I'm sorry for saying it like that,
yeah.
but
for days.
Yeah, because I saw it, and I could see it in your face.
Yeah, it was you see, I started off my career before UFOs. I was doing psychic phenomena. I was doing near-death studies, and then I had the UFO experience. But other than the UFO experience, I really had no sort of weird experiences where it's sort of like paranormal experiences where you sort of get the idea there's a soul or there's a God or there's something beyond the physical. It was like a very normal life. And it was like, why can't I even would talk to experiencers? And I'd say, I'd like to hear a voice in my head. And they'd say, no, you don't want to hear that. You don't want that. No, guarantee you. I said, no, one time I'd like to hear someone talk in my head. So I never really had any sort of weird experiences. But when that happened, and I've actually done a whole manuscript on this download inspiration experience because it's very, very common. And even like J.K. Rowling, who wrote all the books on the Wizard, the 7 books, Harry Potter books, she talks about this download experience where she's going on a train from Manchester to London, and in one split second, all 7 books come to her, including the last line of the book. And so this is the type of experience. It's not just an idea comes into your head. It's an idea that absolutely 100% is true. It's like you're absolutely sure. It's like it comes in a second, and I was so blown away with this. I'm still can remember this. I don't remember anything else in the speech. I just remember these 3 ideas that came into my head that had been in my career the whole time, how they all fit together, and how it sort of changed the whole thing where people who had interviewed me before said, I can't believe, you're the guy, the document guy. You're the nuts and bolts guy. I can't believe you've gone over to the woo-woo side with this consciousness and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, basically, I didn't choose to do it. I was teleported. I had no choice. It was such a dramatic experience. And that it was at that point when everything started to fit together and everything came very quickly, like this whole manuscript on downloads and inspirations. Within 2 months, I had the whole manuscript done. It just came so fast, and everything fit together. And when you get onto this, it's almost like I don't know if you've ever done any shows on synchronicity, but that's when I talk to people about synchronicity, and people will describe this, that when you're getting a lot of synchronistic events, it means you're on the right track. And that's what I've always wanted, is to do the right thing and to try to figure out how this works. So when you get these synchronicities and suddenly everything starts to fit together, you're on the right track, and things have really, I just cannot explain how much has happened since that download experience. The first 35 years, I was sort of doing what everybody else did, file sightings, do all this sort of stuff, do documents and stuff. But the stuff since this download in February of 2012, just unbelievable, the amount of material that has come to me and ideas since that point.
What did you do to document and to record it? Did you just sit down at a computer and just plug it straight out?
No, it was just 3 simple ideas. There were things that had happened in my career, because what I'd done, I had my UFO sightings, and we had all these things for a year and a half, and I chased people around and filmed and interviewed all these people, put the manuscript, and then the local publisher here said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. And nobody would publish this manuscript. And it was at that point I said, well, this is a total waste of time. These sightings, it's a waste of time. They're nice stories. I can tell you stories. Everybody's interested. But it really doesn't prove anything. And it was at that point that I wanted the answer to what I had seen in 1975. Mm-hmm. So that's why I chased the Canadian government. I figured, well, somebody's got to know. So I chased the Canadian government. I got all the files from this Wilbert Smith, who had run the Canadian government program, who was a contactee, who had seen the bodies and the crafts, and was very open about what was going on. Then I chased the former president of Penn State University. He's got 14 honorary doctorate degrees, chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, the biggest military think tank in the United States. And I chased him. Then I chased the president of the United States. I'm in this download, this experience where I'm watching Colin Andrews give this speech in February 2012, and 3 events that I'd seen for years and never put together all suddenly popped into my head, and they were all these consciousness things. And the first one was this November of 1950, one of the documents from the Canadian government. It's one of the only, or maybe the only top secret, legitimate top secret document on flying saucers. It was written in November of 1950 by the Canadian government, and it talks about going to the United States and asking the Americans, what's going on? What's the deal on flying saucers? And for 30 years, I would quote this document. Stanton Friedman was one of the people who forced this document out. I would quote the document, and it says, we were told by American officials, flying saucers are real. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. A small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush is in control of trying to figure out the modus operandi, and this subject is of tremendous significance to the Americans. So for 30 years, I would quote this. When I was sitting in this lecture in 2012, the very next line of the document popped into my head. We were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. I'd never quoted. I knew it. It suddenly popped into my head. It was talking about mental phenomena. In 1950 already, the Americans had told the Canadians that mental phenomena was associated with the flying saucers, which is critically important because the contactees, the abductees' contactees, would not appear till 1961 when Betty and Barney Hill came and talked about telepathy with the aliens. And the first contactees in the 1950s, Adamski and Williamson, wouldn't appear till a couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb in 1952. So in 1950, nobody was talking to aliens. Nobody was talking about telepathy, and the Americans had already told the Canadians that mental phenomena was involved, which means they had a live alien at Roswell. That's where they got it from. They knew that the aliens talked telepathically. That was the first thing that popped in my head. And at the same time, all these things popped into my head at the same time. The second was we were chasing this Dr. Eric Walker, who we knew what was going on. He basically said he'd been at a set of briefings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He said, unless you have the mind of Einstein, forget it. You're not going to learn anything. Study something else. I don't talk about this. I'm not going to talk about this. And at one point, they were asking him about the control group. What's the control group? Is it still 12 guys? Is it all Americans? And he said, look, let me ask you a question. And this popped into my head, what Walker had said. I never understood what he meant. He said, look, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy who was interviewing from Britain said, well, he didn't really have an answer. So Walker answers his own question. And he says, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in. He's talking about the control group. You will not be taken into the control group. Very few people understand about it. That popped into my head. The third thing that popped in my head, all this was happening and instantaneously. The third was Jan Hartson, who's the international director of MUFON, lives there in Los Angeles. He's talking about UCLA alumni, engineering alumni, 1993, March of 1993. This is 2 years after Walker's interview where he talks about ESP.
Right.
Jan Hartson's telling the experience. He's listening to Ben Rich. Ben Rich is giving this, he's the former president of Lockheed Skunk Works, which developed the U-2, the SR-71, the stealth fighter, all the drones, all the high-tech, black budget stuff for the U.S. military was developed at Lockheed Skunk Works. He's the head guy. He's talking about this speech, and he's talking about all the planes that they built, all the black ops stuff. And at the very last slide, he shows this flying saucer, and he says, we now have the technology to take ET home. And Jan Hartson's sitting there and just about fell over. The whole audience starts to laugh, and he was like, man, this is significant. This guy's the top guy. And so he starts asking these questions after the lecture, and then Ben Rich is after the question thing. Ben Rich is heading for the door, and Jan chases him, and he says, Ben, I'm interested in what you're talking about. I'm interested in propulsion. I've been interested all my life. How do they get here? How does it work? And Ben turns around and he says, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan Hartson says, I didn't expect a question. I didn't realize he was going to ask this. He said, I don't know. It just means everything in time and space is connected. He's sort of giving him a question back. It means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben Rich says, that's how it works. Gets in his car and drives away. So we have, at this time, all three, and these are high-level guys, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works.
Sure.
The former, he was a Eisenhower associate. He'd done engineering studies for Eisenhower. And the head of the Canadian government operation, telling that the American officials had told him this, all three saying mental phenomena is part of this phenomena. And there was just that tremendous thing. And so I figured I got it all figured out. And it was in 2013 when I gave my first lecture on consciousness at International Congress. And then after, all these women came to me and said, oh, here's my book on consciousness. So here's my book. And I was like, all these people giving me books on consciousness. And I suddenly realized I'd been asleep for 35 years. And a lot of people had already caught on to this thing, that consciousness is a key part to the UFO phenomena, if not the key part to the UFO phenomena.
What was the third part of the download?
Well, there was the three. There was the Canadian government document about mental phenomena being told to them by the Americans. The second was this Dr. Eric Walker in 1991 saying, unless you understand about ESP. And the third was Jan Hartson being told by Ben Rich that ESP is how they get here. And then when I gave the lecture in 2013, when I won the award at UFO Congress, I give the lecture on consciousness. And I say, man, here it's consciousness, and this is how the thing operates and all sorts of stuff. And then at the end, the head of Phoenix MUFON says to me, oh, there's this woman that wants to talk to you. And I go, she says, do you still want to talk to her? And I figured, well, I guess I agreed to talk to her. And I said, well, I don't want to look stupid. So I'm at this woman's house on a Monday, and this woman comes to the door and she says, what did Stacy tell you about me? And I said, I don't know. I'm just supposed to talk to you. Good. So she comes walking in. She's like in her 70s. She starts talking. She's doing remote viewing for the government. And you're in the field. You hear all this kind of stuff. And it's like, what big deal? Okay. She's telling all this weird stuff. And then she says, I was flying the ship last night. And I said, you what? You flew the ship? She said, I flew the flying saucer. I've flown 3 of them. I said, you've flown the flying saucer? Are you kidding me? And she says, no, I've flown the flying saucer. And I says, well, how do you do it? And she said, you do it with your mind. And as soon as she said that, I realized why she wanted to talk to me. I'd given the consciousness lecture. And then within 1 year, I swear to you, within 1 year, Jimmy, I had 24 people who'd come to me and said they had flown the flying saucer. In fact, I did a little poll for Yvonne Smith's group, and about 12 people answered the poll for Saturday night. And 2 of those people said they'd flown the flying saucer. And everybody says the same thing. When they say they've flown the ship, I'd always say, how do you do it? And everybody, to a person, to a woman, to a man, will say it's done with the mind. And so you can have this evil, good alien thing. I always bring this up. People say, oh, they're evil aliens. I say, well, if they're evil aliens, why are they teaching people to fly the flying saucer? I mean, if you're a woman on this planet, if you're in Saudi Arabia, it is illegal for you to drive a car. But if you get abducted by an alien, they'll let you, without a license, they'll let you fly the ship. So, I mean, this is an important principle that has come across that we're starting to get into now. This is basically maybe what all the secrecy is about. Maybe not so much the technology or the metals and stuff. It's this consciousness thing. If you were in Roswell and you're picking up the wreckage and there's a live alien there and this thing's talking in your head, you suddenly realize, like, this is important. You can go over to Putin and stick stuff in his head and control. This is massive technology.
Right. I'll say this. When you go to Yvonne's gatherings, I'm not speaking to you, Grant. You know what I'm talking about. I'm just speaking to the audience. You go there and you watch the audience, because I stand in the back. I'll just stand in the back and just watch. That's, I'll dress in black and, but stand in the back and watch the focus of the audience there. It's pretty crazy. And her audiences are a bit different than other symposiums and conferences because of her focus on what she does. But when somebody will inevitably say, okay, how many people here have had an experience? Everybody raises their hand. It's a very focused, very honest group. Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. I can't wait to come hang out with you this Saturday. I wanted to back up a little bit. When I think that we, all of us in ufology, and maybe the world in general, but I think we're all kind of focusing in and narrowing the beam a little bit more laser-like on consciousness when it comes to this now. We were looking for answers, from the 50s. Oh, by the way, you left out George Van Tassel, by the way, when you said Adamski, the contactees from 52. Van Tassel didn't happen until 53, but he was speaking about this directly too as well. But I think that we're starting to narrow our focus a little bit, and you're really helping on that. And if science would just apply what they're working on, physicists and string theory and parallel universes, if we start to look at all of this, it can all tie together, and consciousness could be exactly that. And who else is Graham Hancock. He changed gears. Graham definitely changed gears on us a few years ago. And when you go from his original research and his original speeches to the way that he is speaking now, that's exactly what he's talking about.
Sure. Sure. Or Colin Andrews, if you've
Yeah.
read Colin Andrews.
That's what I meant to say. Do you owe Colin Andrews money?
I mean, you hear some of his stories. I mean, he talks about it as well, about this chess piece thing.
Yes,
that
yes.
I've come to really believe that we can actually see them moving the chess pieces around on the board, and you hear the stories of them giving him instructions of what to do, and where they tell he's supposed to come public that he's an abductee and all this sort of stuff, and he's going like, I can't do this. I mean, this is game over. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm the head of this UFO crop circle thing, scientific stuff, and I can't do this. And just bizarre, where he suddenly then he decides, well, I guess I have to do this, to go public with the fact that he was abducted at 5 years old, and that this is what this is all about, and his career is over. And he tells the bizarre story about going to the lecture at the X conference, and he has not announced to anybody that he's changed the speech. And he says he's about to give the lecture, and this guy walks up to him and he says, you know, you have to do this, don't you? And Collins couldn't believe it. And you hear these kind of stories where, just basically his shift to consciousness, to this whole sort of thing. And there was actually a conference took place in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, which was consciousness and UFOs. And Danny Sheehan spoke there, and I spoke there, and it was basically just consciousness and UFOs. And you can see the focus has really sort of shifted to people actually trying to get this down. And I think we are actually understand quite a bit. The problem with the scientific community is, and I described this in my lecture when I was in Toronto at the consciousness thing, is that if you take a look at the highest level of science in the United States, which is the National Academy of Sciences, and you take a look at the polls, there's only 4% of them believe in any sort of paranormal phenomena, and there's only 7% of them that believe in any concept of God. And that's because they're bought into this physical world thing. And it's almost like the Vatican, that if you step out and say there's something beyond the physical world, that's the end of your career.
Right.
I mean, you're at this highest level. So that's what I think is really holding back the UFO community. It's not the government, it's not the media, it is science, because of this high level science where they control all the budgets, they control all this kind of stuff. So that's what you have to do is sort of move those guys, and it's almost the idea that the things will advance as people die. The more scientists die, the more it advances, because it's the young generation
that's right.
that will bring up the new ideas. And that's when I do the whole music thing. I do this whole download of the rock musicians, all that massive number of rock musicians that have been abducted or had sightings and stuff like that. And that's because they're dealing with that generation from between 10 and 25 years old. And that's the generation that changes culture. That's the idea
Sure.
that changes, that things shift. And that's where the aliens are targeting that age group that listen to this music. And that's why I say so many musicians are abductees. It's unbelievable. It's almost like they've got them all.
I have to get to this really quick. This came in from Lauren Robb. Also, guess what his Twitter handle is? Winnipeg Jets Online. There you go. All right. So anyway, he says, you spoke of synchronicities earlier. He says, I see 1111 and 111 on every single day, looking at clocks and watches and so forth. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we see the 1111 too. I've had that experience. It's sort of a sign. It's giving you a signpost. I'll give you an interesting story in music. One of the bands that I was studying was Bono, who's the biggest now. And he does his big tour in 2012. Called it the 360-degree tour around Europe and the United States, the biggest grossing tour of all times. And during his tour, he's got this big set, and he calls it the spaceship. And on the spaceship, and then above the screen, he has these aliens. And this alien's going across, and there's flying saucers and aliens and stuff. And the alien is saying, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? And then it goes 333, 333 across the screen. And this is like the key signal. 1111 is big, 111, but 333 for an abductee is like the biggest signal, where they'll say they wake up at 333 and the abduction takes place, and it's these cue points. So here's on Bono's doing this thing, and this alien is saying, what time is it? What time is it? And then it says 333, and then Bono says, end of the world, time to get help. Now, some people interpret it as Bono saying it's Jeremiah 33, 3, which is call upon me in the day of trouble and I will deliver thee. But it's just so weird how Bono is putting this alien message across, this 333. And this is big, especially when you talk with experiencers and contactees, is seeing these repetitive numbers, whether it's 222, 333 is probably the biggest, and 1111 is very big. And even a UFO group that we have here that we just started last year, we had an experience where we had a meeting where suddenly we were just leaving the meeting and someone said, it's 1111. And we just went, wow. It's like, it is something. We don't really know what it means. It's some sort of signal, wake-up signal. It's almost like abductees will get triangles put on their hand or on their hips and stuff like this. It's almost like something to give you a message. 1967, there was an abduction of a police guy by the name of Shermer, I think his name was. And he was the next after Betty and Barney Hill was 61, then Shermer, then there was a Pascagoula in 73, then Travis Walton in 75. Then the UFO abductions took off. But in 67, there was almost none. And this guy was regressed. And what he was told by the aliens was this: we want you to believe, but just a little bit. And that's what I think the aliens are doing. They're giving you these little signals where you can't deny. You know something's happened, but they're not giving you the whole answer because they want you to come to the conclusion yourself. They want to give you these signals, 1111 or whatever, to make you think, to make you start thinking about this thing. So they'll give you little bits of, if you're abducted, they'll give you little bits of what's happened to you, make you think about it and make you think it through, rather than landing on the White House lawn and scaring the daylights of everybody and say, this is what it's all about, because then you're putting it in people's faces. People have to change on their own. It's more effective if people decide themselves to come to a new conclusion rather than forcing your beliefs on somebody else. So the aliens have this non-intervention thing. They can't really intervene, but they're doing this indirect signaling thing where they're basically indirectly telling us what's going on, and gradually we're putting the pieces together, and that's the way they want us to do it.
Lauren Robb from Winnipeg, he just posted a bunch of pictures of 1111 in his life, and it's pretty crazy. I haven't experienced it, but our house has, and I haven't experienced it, so I can't. Part of my problem with it is I have analog watches. I don't have a digital watch that would say 1111. Yeah. So I'm always looking at an analog watch, self-winding automatic watch. That's what I wear, and so I don't have that experience. And then here in the studio, everything, I have the analog world clocks, for around the world time. And so I don't have a digital clock facing me all the time to turn and face 1111. But there are other family members of mine that have come to me about this. And I haven't experienced it. And now, so we did a little research over the last couple of weeks on this, and we're not the only ones. And now I mention it to you, and you're like, yes. And then, boom, I'm looking at these pictures on Twitter, and I'm wondering what's going on with this. I don't want to be new to the party here, but I have an excuse. That's all. I have an excuse. I don't wear a digital watch. So
it's big. It's big. It is not uncommon. It is. It's very well. Like if you were maybe Saturday night, I'll ask people at the thing, and you watch the hands go up. I'll ask them how many people have seen 333 1111, and you just watch the hands.
Oh, let's do that. Let's do that this Saturday. Will you do that for me?
Sure.
Okay.
And my Winnipeg Jet fan there, we have an experiencers group here in Winnipeg that we just started based upon what Yvonne Smith started in Los Angeles. We've got one here. We call it Experiencers Anonymous. And it was basically trying to get very high-level witnesses that we knew that had been abducted into a room where they could sit in the back of the room like AA and say nothing, and nobody's going to talk to them. But we have one there, and if this guy wants to come to our Experiencers Anonymous group in Winnipeg, he'll hear all sorts of stories just from people around, and that's really enforces it when you sit at a table and someone across the table says, oh yeah, I know about that, I've had this, and you suddenly realize this is not some weird type thing. This is part of the phenomena. We haven't understood what it is yet, but it is part of the phenomena.
Would you be regressed? Would you do that? Would you allow Daryl Sims or Yvonne?
I'm seriously thinking about it because I did have one experience. I have the Rh negative blood. This is one of the sort of the things that people talk about.
Right.
The abductees all have the Rh negative blood. I've had all the nosebleeds as a kid, and I did have one experience in it was 76 when I had the experience. We had these The big ones are flying around at 75, and then 76, these small orb-type objects, we call them ground lights, orb objects on the ground. And there was one where it came right above the car where we were bugging it, and then the big one came, a big triangle. It sat right on top of the car. And at that point, it was the scariest moment of my life, and I can still remember it was above the car, and then the object just slipped the slightest little bit to the left. It just sort of moved, and the fear instantly went away. And at that point, I think maybe there may have been an abduction. But I seriously have most people, I think the polls show that 85% of people remember without hypnosis. People think that it all comes through hypnosis, and basically 85% of abductees and experiencers remember most of what they have without any abduction, because a lot of hypnosis. A lot of people don't like hypnosis because they think, they're going to start, clucking like a chicken, and they're going to lose control of themselves. So a lot of people don't want to do it, but I seriously am considering it. Yes.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I really don't want to know. Yvonne said, Jimmy, come on, let's, Daryl Sims looked at me right in my eyeballs. Jimmy, I had a little experience. I've told the story so many times on the air. I'm not going to bore you with it or the audience, but I had a little sleep paralysis experience one time where there was something in my room, and I could see this thing behind over in the corner, and the lights were off, and I was alone, and I couldn't tilt my head up. I was petrified. I was scared, adrenaline, and it went on for about 15 minutes. Now, Daryl is just like, Jimmy, and Yvonne, you need to regress. I think you've had something, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to know. I really, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. It was terrifying enough, the experience that I went through, and I really don't want to relive it. Travis says the same thing. He's when he was on the show, and I've talked to him privately about this too, in that everybody wants him to relive that experience, and it wasn't fun for him. It was terrifying. But yet he understands that people want to know the story, and they want to hear him tell his story, but he relives it, and it's uncomfortable what he does. His brain, his mind, his emotion, his body, he goes, it's trauma for him. And that scares me. I don't want to know. I really don't want to know. Maybe nothing happened, but you know what? I don't want to know. I really don't want to know. I commend you for wanting to do it. I would never.
Well, I'm still hesitant, but I mean, I always looked at it like if it's motivated you, and that's the sort of the idea I'm coming to now, is people do not see UFOs randomly. If you see a UFO or see some event, it was meant to be. You're part of the game, because when people get abducted, nobody sees the UFO. So when they want to not be seen, they're not seen. So when you see them, they want you to see them. And that's why I say, why do UFOs have lights on them? So you can see them. They want you to see them. And if you see a UFO, you're part of the game. I seriously believe that. And one of the lectures I do, I actually go through, I play, for example, Bud Hopkins had a sighting in 1964, and I play him talking about this sighting. When you hear him talking about this 1964 sighting, you go like, wow, there's no doubt this guy was abducted. Something happened. This is not an ordinary sighting. It sat there. It was looking at him. He's looking at his daylight. They're driving. He reenacts the thing. He drives down the road to see how long he had been watching this thing. His life was totally sort of dragged into this thing. And then his first case was 1975, where the guy he buys scotch from at the local corner liquor store tells him this story, which is like a total setup story. I mean, it's like the aliens set this thing up. I mean, this guy's driving home after closing the liquor store. This thing's beside the freeway, and there's 4 aliens with shovels outside the flying saucer. I mean, come on. It's just like a setup. And so that's gets Bud in, and he gets dragged in. And I can do all these stories, whether it's the head of MUFON or any of these major people, and even presidents of the United States, and that you start looking at their sighting is, if Reagan had a sighting, was he abducted? I say yes, probably, because part of the story about the Reagan thing that people don't know was, and I confirmed this with Shirley MacLaine, I knew that Reagan had this experience. For example, in 1975, he's governor. He's coming down from Sacramento down to Los Angeles. There's a cocktail party, and Steve Allen, the comedian, is there, and Lucille Ball is there, and both of them tell the story about Reagan and Nancy coming into the room. They're all excited. They're talking about this sighting they saw. They come late to the party, and they just couldn't stop talking about it, and it happened as they were coming in. And then when Shirley MacLaine tells the story in a British newspaper, I go back to Shirley MacLaine through her webmaster, and I say, is Shirley being misquoted? They said, no, she's not. And what she said is that Lucille Ball told her that when Reagan told her the story, that he had said it was not just a UFO sighting, the thing had landed and that there was an alien, and he had telepathically interacted with the alien, and the alien had told him to run for president. So that's the whole thing, is when you have presidents who see UFOs, you start to wonder, is it random, or are they controlling the presidents of the United States? Reagan was one of the big things. One of the big things in the UFO thing in the 50s and 60s was get rid of the nuclear weapons. That was one of the big alien messages. And that was Reagan's big thing. Reagan wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons in the worst way. He spent his whole 2 terms trying to get rid of nuclear weapons and did a huge amount to stop nuclear weapons. So you start to look at, are they influencing the presidents? If you read Yvonne Smith's latest book, that has with this Coronado incident where this big resort where there's like 12 people, all these people get abducted at the same time, and President Clinton is there at the time. He's not at the hotel, but the Secret Service is at the hotel, and on the Sunday he gives a presentation at the hotel, and there's a report that Yvonne gets that the president was abducted as well. So you start to look at, are they, as I said, moving pieces around like chess pieces? And because Reagan was very interested in the phenomena, and Bill Clinton told Paul Davids, who you probably know in Los Angeles, Paul Davids had an interaction with him that lasted 10 minutes where they were talking about UFOs, and he told Paul Davids quite clearly, I'm fascinated in this subject. And when I lectured in Arkansas, this is a number of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a woman approached me after the lecture, and her sister owned the famous barbecue restaurant that if you look back in the Clinton history with Bill and Hillary Clinton, they hung out at this barbecue restaurant in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And this is where they sort of grew up and hung out with their friends in high school, and before they took off to do, Yale and all this sort of stuff. And she said that her sister told her that the Clintons had an experience. It was either the Clintons or somebody very close to them at the restaurant that they had been talking about it. And so you get to this whole thing is, are they controlling presidents as well as you, me, Bud Hopkins, Jan Hartson? Jan Hartson has a flying saucer in his backyard when he's like 9 years old. 30 feet away, he becomes the director of MUFON, and tells the story that when he goes back into the house after the incident, that his brother is watching cartoons, and it's an hour and a half later. So it looks like Jan Hartson was probably abducted. So you start looking at this, and it gets more and more complex, and more that a lot of it we don't remember, and that the key players who are seeing this are being influenced, that there are no random UFO sightings. The more I look at it, the more it appears that if you've had an experience, you're part of the thing. And it doesn't mean you have to know what's going on, but you've been given a mission, and it seems like you're doing your mission. I'm doing my mission. In fact, my first sighting, when I look back, and this is like going back 35 years, suddenly you start playing it in a different way. When this thing started for me was February of 1975. I had no interest in UFOs. I had interest in near-death experiences and Edgar Casey, the psychic. No interest in UFOs. So the sightings start in this small town.
Okay, let me jump in right there, because we're gonna. That's a good spot for us just to take a quick break. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are talking to Grant Cameron. I'm almost talking as fast as you right now, Grant. Live from Canada. I didn't know Canadians drank that kind of coffee. Man, you're good to go.
I always say when I talk fast, it's not like baseball where you can sit there and read a newspaper at the same time. It's like hockey. It's 25 miles an hour. It's body contact, and it just go. No whistles. You change on the fly. I talk like hockey.
Let's go ahead and jump into 1975. Which became known as Charlie Red Star, and I find that interesting too as well. We'll visit that. But up to this point in your life, as far as you know, and by the way, Canadians in general, you guys have a lot of sightings up there. You really do. Maybe it's the vast open country. It's not exactly the most populated. You can throw in Montreal and Jean-Pierre and Toronto and Winnipeg and Edmonton and Vancouver. But other than that, there's nothing there, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Well, hold on. Regina. We can't leave out Regina.
Big football team there.
Yeah, I've been there. Regina's a cool little town. But Canada, it's vast. So maybe that's why there's a lot of sightings up there. I don't know. But up until 1975, you hadn't had a sighting. I mean, this was fresh for you. Yeah. So take us to that day. It's pretty incredible. I do want you to include your other friends that you went up there with, and well, anyway, I know the story. It's a great incident, and it happened for a long time. It wasn't a one night thing. So take us to that first night.
Yeah. It actually starts a couple of months before, and this is what I'm saying. Where I look at maybe this was them actually dragging me out there, because it had started, and what was happening was in 1975 this happened, and this is exactly the same time that the only operational anti-ballistic missile unit ever going into operation opened at Nakoma, North Dakota, which is about 80 miles south of Carmen, where all this stuff took place. It was the only operational one that ever went operational. It had 300 nuclear weapons, and it was pre-Star Wars. So they're going to try to shoot down the nuclear weapons from the Soviet Union. They had all these intricate radar systems, had installed all these nuclear weapons about 80 miles. And that's when this sighting started. So 75, all these sightings take place in this town called Carmen, Manitoba. In 1976, the CIA takes the drugs out of the water. As far as I know, there has not been a sighting in that town since. In 75, it was like literally every day. They were advertising in the paper. They were saying, shop where Charlie Redstar shops. And it was like a big thing. Everybody in town, nobody would admit they were seeing it because nobody wanted to be crazy, but everybody was seeing this thing. And anyway, it starts in February. The first sighting takes place in February, and it gets big. I'm in a city of about 700,000 people, about 35 miles sort of northeast of there. It's in the paper. It's on the news. Everybody's talking about this town. These things are flying around. I say to my friends, I said, and my one friend, Larry McKenzie, I've known him since I was 5 years old, so 55 years I've known him. He's driving around, and we're driving around in his car, and I said, Larry, instead of us driving around the city, why don't we go out and see what everybody's looking at? And he says, yeah, okay, I will do that. But we don't do it. Completely forget about it. Then at the end of the Vietnam War, and that's one of the key things I would think was involved, end of the Vietnam War is April of 1975. This happens about 2 weeks after the war ends.
Now, is Carmen, by the way, if you switch 2 letters around in your name, it's Carmen. I don't know if you realize that. But is Carmen, is it isolated up there in Winnipeg? In Manitoba?
It's a town of about 2,000 people. The closest town would be 12 miles from it. It's farming community.
That's what I mean.
No industry.
Right. Completely isolated, farming fields for miles.
Yeah, and
right.
that's what blew me away when I couldn't figure out 30 years later, went back to the guy at the airport who was sort of the main guy, who was the tour guide, who would take the news crews out and the TV crews. And because a lot of the TV crews were trying to film this thing. And I said to him, Bob, why were they here? Like, why would they come to Carmen? I can't figure this out. And he said, you know why they were here. And I said, no, Bob, I don't. He said, yeah, you know why they were here. I told you why they were here. I said, Bob, 30 years, I have no idea why they were here in this little town. He said, I told you, the nuclear weapons. I told you they were coming from the U.S. because they would sit up in the hill. There was one hill there, and they could see them coming from the U.S. And we all knew that the Minuteman III nuclear missiles were on the other side of the border. They were only 20 miles away. And like the whole arsenal, we always knew that if there was ever a nuclear exchange, Winnipeg was the first place to go because every 10th Russian missile would come short and it would wipe us out because that was what you're going to try to take out. They're not going to take out the American cities. They're going to take out the missiles because it's the missiles in North Dakota which are going to be shot at the Russian city. So they're going to try to take out these missiles. So we all knew, we lived here. We knew these missiles, these big, 10 warheads on a missile and stuff. We all knew these things were there. We'd seen them as we drove through North Dakota. So anyway, February it starts. Then we don't do anything. The end of the Vietnam War comes. And then in May, this is where I sort of think that the aliens may have actually dragged me out there. The only time this has ever happened in history of UFOs, and has never happened since, the TV crews out there, and they have this thing on the ground, and they don't get it on film. Then they go back to the news. It's a big affiliate of a big network here in Canada, and they go back and the news director says, this is absolute garbage. There's nobody going out to do this stupid UFO things. You guys want to go and chase this stupid UFO, you can go on your own time. So the next night, all these guys volunteering. They got a guy, he's not even a cameraman, he's a film editor. He's got the big camera, and they go out with all these news reporters and stuff, and they're trying to get this thing. And what happens is, they got the thing on the ground, and there's 10 witnesses, and there's pilots, there's news reporters, editors, there's just unbelievable credential people. And they actually send 2 cars out. The camera stays at a central spot. They send 2 cars out, and they actually get this thing on the ground. They can see it on the ground. It's like a movie screen. It's not touching the ground. It's blood red. And they take their bearings in the middle of the dark, in the middle of nowhere, and this thing jumps up in the air. They don't realize it. Meanwhile, the guy on the other end, the cameraman, happens to film just as the thing jumps in the air. Suddenly, all these guys who have volunteered to do this film suddenly have the most famous UFO film in the world in 1975. They take it back. NBC wants it. They're this terribly embarrassing situation. These guys weren't paid. They give the guy $50, tell him to keep his mouth shut, just talk to NBC, do the interview. Anyway, so this film is broadcast in Winnipeg. And then I see it. And I say to my friend Larry, I said, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. Look at this film. It's on the big news. It was all over the city, and the reports were still coming in. What
did you see? What did you see? What in the original video? Yeah.
On the film, well, what happened on the film was the guy's 8 miles away, and he can see this thing glowing up, and it would go down, and the glow up and go down. He said, the next time it glows up, I'm going to shoot the camera. And you remember, it's the first time he's ever shot a TV camera in his life.
Right.
So he shoots the camera, and as he does this, these guys have got this thing surrounded. He doesn't realize this. They come, and this thing jumps up in the air. So what you do on this film, and we've got the film, the thing jumps up in the air, and it's 3 frames of film. And you got to remember, the camera is 8 miles away from where the object, because they have radiation readings. They know exactly where the thing was sitting on the ground. They got the radiation readings, the site, all this sort of stuff. It's 8 miles and a quarter of a mile. The thing jumps up in the air, and there's 3 frames of film. The first frame is being shot at 24 frames a second. The first frame, it's on the ground. The second frame is what we call a flash frame. 1/24th of a second, it lights up the entire horizon with these 2 huge humps of light, and you can see the entire horizon. And in the third frame, the object is at the top of the frame. So it's 8 miles away, and it goes from the bottom of the frame to the top of the frame. And the rumored estimates at the time were that NASA had said it had jumped 5,000 feet in 3 frames. So in 3/24ths of a second, it had jumped 5,000 feet into the air.
1 mile.
Catch this thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they catch it as it goes across. And the cameraman tells me, as he's going across the sky, he sees a star, and he figures, I'm going to get a frame of reference. So he stops the camera at 12, let's say directly north. And so it only picks up these 2 pieces of film. When the object jumps in the air, it picks it up. And when he stops the camera at 12 o'clock. And when he took the film back, they dropped it off 2 o'clock in the morning. They threw it in the box, and the editors cut the film. So they cut the 2 little 6-inch pieces out, and they were just furious. They said, what'd you do with the rest of the film? And they're trying to recover this film out of the film garbage, and they never did find the rest of the film, but they had cut their film because they couldn't see anything. The only thing that showed up was these 2 segments. So this became known as the famous CKY film. And when the guy left, he took the film with him. He said, I owned it. They never paid me for it. I took the film, and he took off of the film, and I got a copy of the film, which disappeared on me, but I have a digital copy of the film. But anyway, so this happens, and then I said to my friend, come on, let's go. This thing's there. Let's go see what they're looking at. And I always describe it this way. It's like you buy a lottery ticket, and you know there's a chance you're going to win, but you know you're not going to win. And that's the way it was. Okay, we're going to go look at this thing. It's not going to appear. When we go, it's not going to show up. We went out. We drive to this town called Carmen. It's 35 miles away. We drive out there. Bobby Rondo, a friend of ours, is sitting in the back seat. I'm in the passenger seat. Larry McKenzie's driving. We drive there. We come into town. We're looking around, and I don't know what to look for. I mean, who knows? And we're looking at stars, planets. I know nothing about stars. I know nothing about planets. I'm looking around, and we see Venus. We thought it was Venus setting, and it looked kind of dramatic. We said, well, if that's what they're looking at, that's not very impressive. So we drive in the city, in the town, out of the town, in the town, out of the town, in the town. And then an hour later, my friend says, we'll drive into the town one more time. If we don't see anything, we're going home. I said, fine with me, man. This is a waste of time. I knew we weren't going to see anything. Let's go in here and let's get this over and go home. So driving into town, and I described this. Everything in the world comes down to belief. Everything is belief. If you say, Jimmy, I had a hole in one yesterday, I can either believe you or I can disbelieve you. I cannot know. Even if you show a film, you may have hoaxed the film. I cannot know. The only people that know that you had a hole-in-one is you and the people that were with you. You cannot. And this is what happened. So it was belief. It comes from the left to the right. It suddenly appears from the left. It's moving across the road in front of us, a little bit up, maybe hard to tell at night, maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile down. Fairly big object, not a light in the sky. It's an actual object, and it's blood red. It's like a beating heart. It's red and it's pulsing. It's like a plasma type thing. And the second this thing appeared, remember we'd drive in, drive out, and we're saying, "Is that it? Is that it?" I don't know. Like I don't know what to look for and stuff like that. The second this thing appeared, everybody said, "There it is." There was nobody said, "Is that what they're looking at? I wonder if that's what it is." Nobody said. Everybody instinctively knew this is what they're talking about. It was so dramatic. It was so weird. It was like, there it is, and it was sort of bouncing up and down. It wasn't flying in a straight line. It was sort of like on I describe it like a bobber on a fishing line, where it was sort of moving up and down. It was moving across the road, and I can still remember it was just like vibrating, and it was going across the road, and there was a bunch of school buses outside the town. And it was so low to the ground, it was going along, and it was going to go in behind these school buses. The car was still moving. I said, "Stop, stop, stop." And so I was getting out of the car as the car was stopping, and the car was still moving. And I ran through the ditch, and I ran up to these school buses because it was already in behind the school buses. And then I watched through these school buses, and I just watched this thing slowly pulsing. And it moved off to the northeast. And I went, "Wow, I can't believe this." I was just like, "Whoa, man." And I went back, and I told all my friends, I said, "You got to come see this, man. This will change your life. This is the most amazing thing." I couldn't stop talking about it. And I drag all my friends out there. And it was one of these things where the whole town, the whole city was coming out to see this thing. Everybody was there. There was kids out there, like in the town. They would, get beer, and they would go out and drink on the back roads and stuff like that. So you'd run into these kids drinking beer, but you'd run into all these people from the city who were saying, Where's this UFO thing? Where are you? Everybody's looking for this UFO thing. And we were trying to find the airport. There was a little tiny strip owned by Bob Deemer, who was the guy that ran the airport there. We're trying to find the airport because he only has runway lights on every once in a while. So there was no runway lights. We were right by the airport. We didn't know it in this little town. And we're standing there, and there's 25 people. I still remember this, the second night, 2 nights later. There's 25 people standing there. And everybody's sort of looking for the UFO, and we don't know who these people are. It's just like a crowd is sort of showing up on this road. Everybody's looking for the same thing. I got these kids. They're doing science fair projects. They're with me. And we're sitting there, and all my friends say, after about an hour, it's not going to come. I said, "No, hang on, man. If you see this thing, this will change your life. This is unbelievable. You got to see this thing." And he said, No. I still remember the last words my friend said. "That's it, Cameron. That's it. We've had it. We're going home. We're hungry. We're going back to Winnipeg for pizza." And off all my friends went. They just took off. And when the thing finally came, about maybe 20 minutes after these guys left, it started with about 25 people. There was 8 people left when this thing finally came. And it was coming from the first time it come from the south going to the north. This time we were looking sort of towards the hills, looking around, and it was like a flash cube, like the old flash cube. It was like a flash on the western sky. And one of the kids in the field was sitting in the field. He said, "Is that it? Is that it?" And I'm looking at this thing, and then it moved, and it was like 8 inches in the field of vision. It just flashed in another part of the sky. And I went,
"Wow.
I guess that's it." And then it flashed in another spot, and then it flashed, and it was jumping around the sky. This flash was jumping all over the sky. And these kids came running out of it. I said, "Yeah, I think," but it didn't look the same thing as the first night. It was just this flashing flash cube was jumping around the sky. And I can still remember the guy beside us was called a Roadrunner courier car. And there was 3 guys and a girl. And this guy this is when motor drives came out for cameras, where you'd go click, click, zzz, click, click, zzz, and it would drive the film. You could shoot one thing after another. And this had just come out. First time I'd ever seen a motor drive on a camera. So this guy had the camera, and I can still remember as this flash is coming, and as it got closer, the flashes got closer and closer together, and then it did appear the same object I saw the first night. When it got really close, it changed from this flashing light to this red pulsing light with a green glow on the back side of the back end of it. Anyway, the guy, I can still remember the sound. There was people. It was like a football game. People yelling, screaming, swearing. Yeah, screaming and yelling. And this girl is crying, and she's, "I can't see it. Someone show it to me. I can't see it." And I could hear this click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, click. And this guy's unloading the camera as this thing's coming at us. And it came towards us. And then I can still remember the second night I'm looking at this thing, and I'm going, "Wow, those people, that's probably from another planet. I just couldn't believe it. And it didn't seem like they were doing anything. They were just sort of flying along, burning gas. They were just going nowhere, just slowly moving in front of came right at me, maybe a half mile away, and then it made a turn, and it moved off into the north like it had done the first night. And these people said, we're going to chase it, because it was going so slow. We did this numerous times. You could actually catch up to it. It was going so slow that you could
how big was when you caught up to it? How big was the object?
Well, it's hard to tell at night. You have no frame of reference. We always thought it was like a maybe 30 feet, 25, 30 feet. It's hard to tell. It was an object. It was not a light in the sky. This was an object that would sort of pulse. The people who saw it up close described this thing as being about 40, 50 feet in length, the people that saw it up close. But at night, like, you have no frame of reference, especially there where there's no street lights or anything like that. All you're looking at is an object in the sky. We could just tell that it was either very close or it was very, very big. And so this object, I can still remember them. I can remember the gravel was flying and off they went. And then I was just obsessed. I mean, after that second time, I went like, why is nobody studying this? Because I knew that almost everybody in the town had seen it. And it was then I determined that I'm going to go talk to the people who've seen this. Everybody must have seen this thing.
Sure.
And I went and talked to the head of the airport and the photographer. And then I ran across the CKY guys that had taken the film. And I put this whole manuscript together, which when it came down to, I put all these stories together of all these people who had seen this thing. And then suddenly this thing disappearing and going away and never coming back. And then the publisher wouldn't publish it. And then I said, okay, this is a waste of time. And then I started to chase the conspiracy, the government, and all that kind of stuff to figure out what was it that I saw. Because I was so, people will describe this, that whether it's like your experience at night where you have this thing, it changes your life. It's a life-altering experience. It is something that you really can't describe, and it's seeing, believing. People can say, I don't believe what you saw. I always say, belief means nothing.
Well,
belief is irrelevant.
This was a mass sighting, Grant. What was the Canadian government's position?
Well, the files that they had, when we pulled the files, they would do stupid things. I mean, it was run by the National Research Council, and their files would basically say a plane going to Las Vegas. And there was a plane that went out of Winnipeg that would fly to Las Vegas. Well, I mean, we were out there every night. We knew what the plane. We knew exactly when it flew. You could hear it. We could see it. It was way up high. You could see the red and the green lights and the flashing lights.
Sure.
We knew that plane every night, and they would describe it as a plane light. It was the old stupid thing. It was like the National Academy of Sciences saying there's nothing to this. Like, you're really not looking at the facts. It's like they're saying they're skeptics, but they're actually believers. They know what the answer is. You can't have UFOs. So it would be all sorts of stupid explanations that would explain these reports of different people. They hadn't seen it. They didn't care. They would just write it off as a star or this plane to Las Vegas and stuff like that. But on the ground, when you were seeing this kind of stuff and you saw the people, it was like when I did a poll at the high school, it was like 59% of the high school kids said they'd seen it. And the national average was 11. And to some towns I did outside the flap area where this is happening, and I would get the 11% people who had seen UFOs in schools. In the Carmen school, it was 59%. So it was way better than half of the population. Now, a lot of them didn't want to talk about it. I would always be the thing where I'd come to the guy and I'd say, I heard you saw Charlie, you saw the UFO. And the first question would be, who told you that? And I'd say, well, so-and-so told me. Yeah, I saw something, but I don't know what it was. And then they would basically sort of tell you their story. And at the end, the story would always end the same way. They'd say, I was the only one who saw it, And then they give you 5 names. And at one point, I had 350 people on a list of people I hadn't even interviewed yet because everybody was squealing on everybody. Nobody wanted to talk about it, but basically everybody was seeing it. Because it was there all the time. And then it just went away. It was like the CIA took the drugs out of the water.
And that was my next question. It just kind of went away. Did Charlie Redstar ever come back?
Nope, never. And that was because in 1975, in February of 1975, they opened the anti-ballistic missile unit in Tacoma, North Dakota, and they shut it in November of 1975. When those missiles were operational, those 300 nuclear weapons, 80 miles south, and they had what was called the Nixon's pyramid, this huge thing to pick up Russian missiles and stuff like that.
Right.
It was shut down with a treaty between the Russians and the Americans, and that was shut down. And as soon as that thing was shut down, the UFOs went away.
I have a question. This is from Renee via email. She says, governments, private industry, and scientific institutions have failed to disclose to the public what they know about our continued mass experiences of UFO sightings and ET visitations and channeling. It appears that our visitors have already chosen to initiate disclosure themselves. If you can believe the increasing numbers of humans who were channeling these others, some groups such as Human Colony, headed by Dr. Max Steinberg, are saying that, and this also relates to, you were mentioning Danny Sheehan earlier, the others have determined it will be less frightening if the initial communications from them to us through humans. I've started following his work and the experiences of these members, and it does appear that disclosure is already taking place. And those types of channelings are being experienced by many others around the world. Do you believe that this is what is happening?
Absolutely. I have a DVD of a 2-hour, 20-minute lecture. I will have some copies in Los Angeles. It is an entire lecture called The Alien Disclosure Plan. And I outline what the aliens are doing. And it is as clear as day when you start looking at the events. Because if you look back on the events of UFO history, it is not people. I've been in it long enough. I mean, I always tell the joke, it's like I've been in this since before Jesus was a carpenter. I mean, I've been in this forever. And it was not the same as it is now. People sort of, they talk about the Greys in the 50s. There was no Greys in the 50s. There was no flying saucers before 1947. There was objects, like there was Foo Fighters, which was a different type of object. There was the rockets in Sweden and all those countries in the 1930s. In the 1890s, the UFOs that we're seeing were wooden ships with big propellers and guys hanging off ropes and stuff like that. And you can see this event as it's almost like the aliens are turning the pages of a book, and all we're doing is watching. And the prime example is the contactees. People will say, okay, the experiencers, the abductees, whatever, it's the aliens. They don't do it right. They block these people's memory, and then it starts to leak, and these people, remember this kind of stuff. What you got to remember is if you take a look at Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, they say that abductions goes back to at least 1900. They've got cases. But as I mentioned earlier in the show, 85% of people remember everything without any hypnosis. So why, from 1900, they were abducting people to 1961 when Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, there was 85% of people who should have remembered their abduction. Why did nobody report an abduction until 1961? If you start looking at the evidence, you see that the aliens are allowing people to remember. There's actual cases. There's Carla Turner, who was no friend of the Greys. She talks, in 1990, she did a lot of abduction research. She talks about her husband undergoing regression and that the aliens had put this implant and said to him in his leg, now it is time for you to remember. If you know the famous case with the Allagash, these 4 artist guys are in the Allagash in northern Maine, and they have this experience where they sort of see this UFO. They flash the light at it. They're out on a boat.
Oh yeah, and the lake, and they have the fire burning.
They have the fire burns out after 3 hours, and they come back, and they don't know they've been abducted. They just realize, they don't even realize the fire has gone down after 3 hours. They've only gone 10 minutes, and the fire is out. So they don't remember anything whatsoever. They just think they outran the UFO. They were paddling away, and they got to the shore, and then they watched this thing fly off into the sky. So to them, they just outran the UFO, and they had this weird experience. They told this UFO experience. Exactly 12 years later, 2 of them both start having bad dreams. Now, what's the chances that exactly 12 years later, 2 of them start having dreams, and they have to go looking for help? And the one guy can't sleep, and he's in a hospital. And they're doing all these tests, and they're testing his heart and why he can't sleep, why he's so edgy, and why he's got all these problems and stuff like that. So he says to the nurse, he says, I'm bored. Go and get me something to read. So she goes down to the gift shop, and guess what she buys him? Communion.
I was going to say a Bud Hopkins book, right?
She brings
Raymond Fowler,
shows him the book, and he totally freaks out. They have to restrain him. He absolutely goes bizarre. And then they bring in the psychiatrist, because this guy's lost it in the hospital. They bring in the psychiatrist.
Grant, it was the cover of the book, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the cover. And
that's all he had to see, right?
Sure. And if you take a look, at Whitley Strieber talks about the fact that he said he wanted to call it Body Pain. That was going to be the name of the book. And that Anne started to channel in the middle of the night, and she said, no, we aren't going to call it communion. We aren't going to call it body pain. We're going to call it communion because that is what it is, a communion with the people. And that's why he changed the cover. And I've heard the story. I haven't got it confirmed that he was told to put the alien face on the cover. And there's so many people. I talked to one girl who had a 1-year-old child. When she first saw the book, she said she just about dropped her kid. And all you have to do to see the power of the fact that the aliens commanded this cover for people to wake people up is all you have to do is go to Amazon.com and look up communion and look at the comments underneath communion, and you'll see pile one after another people saying, when I saw the picture on the communion book, I knew I'd been abducted. So this guy freaks out in the hospital. He's showing the communion. They have to restrain him. He totally loses it. They bring in the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, what's the problem here? What's your problem? And he says, I didn't want that book. I don't know. It just bothers me. And he says, why does it bother you? Tell me about it. He says, well, it reminds me of my dreams. What kind of dreams are you having? And guess who the guy is? The guy happens to be an associate of John Mack, this psychiatrist. Now, what's the chances? Eh? It just happens that Fowler, who writes the book, happens to be coming through town. So you can see these orchestrated type things where the aliens are actually setting this stuff up. And they're slowly bringing this stuff out. And it's not a direct telling us what's going on. It's indirectly telling us what's going on. It's sort of leading people to think this, to put it out, to put it into movies, to put it into books. For example, there's 3 movies coming out that most people don't know about. And one of these movies, one of them is a main one that I was actually involved in part. This is the Chris Bledsoe story. If you ever get a chance to have him on the air, Chris Bledsoe, this is a major businessman doing $18 million worth of business. He's a Pentecostal, very in North Carolina. It's Bible Belt. And he has this 5-person abduction experience, just totally sort of blows him away. And he has an experience where you look at this whole experience. The aliens basically wanted him to come out with a movie. And this movie is not going to come out. And I believe the budget is $80 million. Warner Brothers, it should be out by, say, next spring. I heard Julie Roberts may be playing one of the roles. It's going to be a big movie on abduction and the message behind that he was given. So you see this kind of stuff that they're orchestrating all this thing. And I do a lecture where I talk about the whole orchestration. And I say, do you think this is chance? Do you think this is chance? And you can see the aliens doing this, they're doing that. And there's no doubt in my mind the aliens are disclosing.
Okay, this is perfect timing. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking to Grant Cameron live from Canada. Grant, you need a nice shot of good Canadian whiskey. Take a deep breath. Let's just, okay. Hey, I've got a couple questions from some listeners, and we haven't even discussed one president. This is amazing, and also I wanted to get into Shag Harbor. I wanted a 5-minute opinion on Shag Harbor, but anyway,
I know nothing about it though.
Okay, good. So we can take that out. We're running out of time already. Here we go. With the world stage, and this is from our friend Ben Miller, he says, with the world stage on edge of a nervous breakdown, what does Grant think of the nature of ETs visiting our world? Are they caring and helping, or evil and waiting for our demise, or indifferent to our problems and just recording our history?
I do not believe there are any evil aliens. It's a long explanation. I'll just put it at that. I do not believe there's any evil aliens. They're with me teaching people to fly ships. And I believe they're here like a number of different things, whether it's angels, spirits. This is why I wrote this download inspiration book. We're getting help from all sorts of things. Mark Twain said 99% of everything that we come up with is plagiarized, and that's basically the truth. We take from everybody. We're getting ideas. I go through 8 Nobel Prizes that came in dreams and downloads, and I go through all sorts of things. We're getting all sorts of help from all sorts of people. I believe they're here for our good, and they're also here because we are the children who have found the matches. If you take a look at entanglement in quantum physics, everything in the world, in the universe, is entangled. If you have a particle and you affect that particle in the other part of the universe, its entangled particle will instantly change its spin or whatever to balance out. Everything is entangled. Therefore, when we detonated an atomic bomb in August of 1945 and dropped 2 of them on Japan, they knew it, and that's when they showed up. That's when this thing really got going. and they are here. And when I do the alien music stuff, one of the first songs that I was told the aliens had influenced, and this is kind of a long story, but it's a song by Neil Young, who came from Winnipeg. He now lives in Los Angeles, and the song is called After the Gold Rush.
Mm-hmm.
And the song is, it talks about the fact that we are treating the world like a gold rush, and when the gold is gone, it's going to be like a ghost town, and the aliens are going to come, and they're going to use the silver pods, which are the flying saucers, and they're going to move the chosen ones, which is Wade Yvonne Smith, and I say the contactees are the chosen ones to another planet. So Neil Young was asked, what did this mean? Dolly Parton wanted to sing the song. He said, I have no idea. I was totally stoned when I wrote it. But this was 1968. He talked about us destroying the environment. And if you look, Yvonne Smith will say absolutely everybody that she has regressed. When she goes to that question, everybody has been shown these catastrophic images on board the ship, that we are destroying the planet and that we are at a tipping point and that we have to straighten this out. So they are here for our good. They're not here to steal our gold. This is they're basically, that's part of their role. And same as we try to go and help other nations, that's what they're doing. And I do not believe there are any evil aliens.
And this is another question from DTAP, and this comes in from Twitter. It kind of is what you're talking about now, but I'm going to get to the second half of the question, which is there a reason for them to intervene in Earth politics and lives? Is there a reason for that?
They're not interested in politics. They're interested in from the bottom up, moving the revolution from the bottom up. That's why I say they're interested in music, because music influences kids between the ages of 12 and 25, and they are the ones that make all the marches on Washington, whether it's for gay rights or for civil rights or stop the war in Vietnam. All those were young children. That's where they're trying to influence. Once you're 25 years old, the aliens could care less about you. If you've never been abducted, they're not interested. Your ideas are set. They're not going to change your ideas. They're not going to change your beliefs. Your beliefs are set. It's the young people. That's why they abduct young children, babies, because they want to get you before your ideas are set. They're gradually influencing people. And when it comes down to this whole thing about them taking people against their will, my firm belief, and I have a couple of experiences, Chris Bledsoe, this one they're doing the movie on, is one of them. He was in his regression. He was talking about a promise, and John Mack's associate, a Dr. O'Connor, said to him, "What are you talking about? What's this promise you're talking about?" He said, "Ask the aliens. What are you promising them?" And he said, "They have been with me since before I was born, and the promise is to carry the message."
Have you done? Well, that's a great point. Let's explore that for a second, because I haven't quite heard it put out like that. Under 25. Let's have you done a Excel spreadsheet on this? Betty and Barney Hill, they were definitely young. They were well, I don't know if they were newlyweds, but
they would have been taken their whole life.
But how old were they in 1961? They were younger. Were they both under 25?
Yeah, but I would say that if you got them and regressed them, they would say that they'd been taken since they were young children.
Okay, Travis Walton, definitely under 25.
Well, Travis is the story's missing, because Travis hasn't undergone regression to go back and see when it first happened.
Right.
He just had the one regression. So I think the idea that Travis was only taken once, I do not believe it.
Right.
No matter what anybody says.
But he was in 1975, he was under 25. He was a kid. He was, 21, 22 years old, 20, 21, 22?
Yeah.
Interesting.
See, I say there's abductions your whole life, and then there's what's called the awakening experience, where they sort of turn you on and say, okay, it's time for you to remember. Because a lot of people have been abducted, and when you regress them, they'll tell you about their childhood, but there comes a point when whether it's in a hospital in Boston or whether it's Chris Bledsoe on a riverbank in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where they wake you up and they say, okay, now it's time to remember. And suddenly you suddenly realize something's happened, or you in your bedroom. But if you go back, if you did get regressed, it wouldn't have been just that one incident in your bedroom. It would have gone right back to when you were a baby.
Interesting. Can we do that on Saturday too as well? That's a good check of hands in the room. That's really interesting. I hadn't quite looked at it like that. So if you're over 25 and you haven't had an experience, you could be in the clear.
Oh yeah. In fact, David Jacobs, I think, says 20. if you haven't had one by the time you're 20, don't worry about it. You're not going to have an experience.
I have a good friend calling in. Let's grab one quick call here real quick. The phone lines are not open. I'm doing it for this gentleman right here. I'd like to welcome to the program. Dino, how are you? Say hi to Grant.
Hi, good evening, Grant. Thank you for sharing your interesting information and experiences with all of the Fadernauts.
Thanks.
I have a question, though. You mentioned it just a while ago, that you seem to have had experience that it seems like you're centered on the gray race. And being a person who has never, personally that I know of, had any experience with extraterrestrial, I hear about the different races, and I have spoken with individuals who have, met the lizard people, and the great whites, and could they have a different agenda? And could, in your experience, because you say there's a psychic connection, could a lot of these grays be biological androids?
I don't know about the biological androids. The only difference between us, and I'll describe this in my lecture, the only difference between us and aliens is one thing, and one thing only. Aliens are telepathic. All aliens are telepathic, and that means they understand consciousness. That's how they get from there to here. That's how it all works. So they're telepathic. If you take a look, there's a guy by the name of Rosales, Albert Rosales. He has a humanoid sighting reporting thing, and he has cataloged all the humanoid reports through history, and he's got 18,000 humanoid reports. I asked him one time, and the estimate, I think, is about 1,000 different reports of different types of aliens. The only reason there's so much talk about the Greys, the reptilians, and the Nordics is that they're interacting. So a lot of these other races aren't interacting. The Greys are abducting people and putting stuff in their heads and getting messages out stuff. So that's why it looks like it's all Greys, but it's not. There's probably tens of thousands of different races, and Rosales has got 1,000 in his catalog of different types of races that are coming here, not just the Greys.
So the agendas must be different.
I think the agendas are all the same. It's like it's almost like a spiritual guide. I mean, why would they be here? People say they're here to steal our gold. They could go. There's a billion planets they could go to. They don't have to steal our gold. They could find a planet where there's nobody and take all the gold they want. I think the agenda, because they're more spiritually advanced or more advanced consciously. When you start understanding the conscious thing, you understand that everything is one in the universe. And that's why we have wars, is because we believe in this individuality. It's us versus them, the good guys versus the bad guys. When you understand consciousness and how consciousness fits together, everything is one. Everything is like a tree, and all the leaves are individuals. We're all different, but we're all connected to the tree, and we're connected to the one. And if you're consciously advanced, you understand that concept, that everything is one. So there is no evil aliens. There are no evil branches. There are no evil races that we have to cut off. Everybody is just a person. Everybody is just and people do good things. They do bad things. There are no evil people. There are no evil races.
Okay, I follow you. But Grant, on another subject, you mentioned earlier that disclosure is going to come through folks like you who have had the experience. So do you therefore feel that things that, for example, Stephen Bassett and the Disclosure Group are trying to make the general public aware of by getting congressional hearings coming in November, do you think that's a waste of time?
It is. It's necessary. I think he's been triggered as much as everybody else. He had an experience. I finally heard about it. I think he's being triggered as well. That has to be done. You have to force this thing, because Obama's talking about it. Obama's talking openly about it. It's a gradual process. It's not something where I believe that they're suddenly going to throw up the white flag. I talked to Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was one of the most powerful guys in the government, and I asked him the question, and this explains the whole thing. I said, in all your jobs in government, have you ever been briefed? Did anybody ever walk in your office and tell you the truth, swear you to secrecy? And he said, if I had been briefed on that subject, it would probably be classified, and I wouldn't be talking about it. So that's why I said the president knows.
I've heard it.
These people.
And Clinton was on Jimmy Fallon. Interestingly enough, we were originally going to have this disclosure stuff this spring of this year, and Clinton maybe hadn't heard that it had been postponed, and then he started talking about, I tried to find the records, but then he didn't cough up anything.
Well, that was Jimmy Kimmel, by the way. Not to correct you, Dino, but I just I don't want everybody to start searching for Jimmy Fallon, and it was Jimmy Kimmel. And I will say this, with all of your research and knowledge on the Clintons, Grant, when you saw, and this is where Dino was going with this. I'm going to ask the question for Dino, which is this. You could tell. I don't know how much of that was set up. All of it is orchestrated when you do talk shows like that. Everything's scripted. Clinton knew the question was coming. I mean, that was not a surprise. Right. But he looked uncomfortable. His body language, he was itching, and you could tell. You could tell that it was orchestrated. It was set up, and he wasn't even comfortable with reading a scripted line. There was something in his eyes. Did you see the same thing?
Oh, yeah. And he's had a couple. We had the one in Hong Kong where he was sort of asked the question.
Right.
And he did the same sort of dance where he sort of laughed, and he sort of goes through this, I tried to find the answer and I couldn't get it and that sort of stuff. He's described it, and he very accurately in one interview, he described it as the ultimate tar baby. And it's the old thing that you touch it and it gets stuck to you. And that's the whole thing. He doesn't want to get stuck to the issue. And
he doesn't want Hillary to, in case she runs, to try to poison her with the cuckoo.
I tried to get that issue. I had the Washington Post for an hour and a quarter, and I gave them the Hillary documents, and I gave them to Fox, and I gave them to Associated Press. They all interviewed me, and none of them would run with the story. Hillary was directly involved in the disclosure effort by Lawrence Rockefeller. We have the documents, and none of them would touch the story.
And that's the point. When it comes to Hillary's a different situation than Bill when it comes to not only disclosure, but what she knows and what she's willing to talk about. She's a totally separate thing. That photograph of her with the book with Nelson, that he gave her, as a matter of fact. Can you? Oh, I should have had you send me that picture before the show, so everybody can understand what we're talking about and how that picture was broken down to see what she was holding. Was that at? Yeah. That was they were on vacation somewhere, right? They were at the presidential.
They had gone. This was the famous 1995. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request because the story was that Rockefeller was trying to get to the president. He couldn't get to the president, and that he decided they came to the Rockefeller Ranch in August of 1995 because Bill was behind in the 1996 election, and they had to have him, instead of going to the Hamptons and playing golf with his rich buddies, they had him going to Wyoming so he could go whitewater rafting and camping, because the swing vote in 1996 was determined by his advisor to be techie people who were into camping. So that's why he went to Wyoming, and he went to the Rockefeller Ranch, and that's where Rockefeller, the CIA, wasn't there. So Rockefeller was determined to talk to him about UFOs, and he sits him down and he talks about UFOs, and we know for sure Hillary was there. We're not sure the president was there, but he talks to Hillary about the whole best evidence document and makes the whole pitch. And the story, according to Whitley Strieber, that Rockefeller had told him was the next morning Hillary had come up and said, okay, we've listened to you, don't ever bring up the subject again. And it all comes down to politics, because politicians aren't there to do good things. They're there to get reelected. And Hillary is not going to talk about it because she wants to play the game. She wants more than anything to be the president. And if you bring up the UFO subject, you're not going to be president. So she's not going to play the game. She got burnt once already with Gene Houston on the whole channeling thing. She had all these New Age people. Bill and Hillary had these New Age people coming into the White House. And one was Gene Houston, who was one of the top New Age people out of New York City, was friends with Rockefeller. And she was doing the channeling thing where she was talking to Eleanor Roosevelt and Gandhi, and they wanted her to talk to Jesus. And she said, no, she didn't want to do that. And that story was broken by the Washington Post. And Hillary just almost ended her career as first lady. And so she knows that this can burn you. She's not going there. She wants to be president. She's not going to talk about UFOs. And so that's why she said to Rockefeller, okay, we've listened to you. Now don't ever bring up the subject again. Because as Bill says, this is like the ultimate tar baby. You touch it and you try to get it off your hand with the other hand, and that hand gets stuck, and then you get total tangled up in it, and it'll take you down. And to be president is all Bill ever wanted since he was about 16 years old. Hillary wants to be president, and you're not going to do anything that's going to kill those chances of being president. So they will put it to the side.
Grant, if we could shift gears, well, that's understood. I think we get that. But the Sheehan, the lawyer, not our Sheehan that's in the Fatal Route, you're tight with him. And when I heard his story at the disclosure hearings last year, the mock disclosure hearings, he did get to go into a room and see pictures in a box of the Roswell craft. and all kinds of stuff. And he's been in the political machine. What is he doing besides? What do you know that he's doing, and what other things will he tell us about what he has seen?
Well, that's all he's really seen. He was involved in this congressional research study that had been asked for. Jimmy Carter had requested this because Jimmy Carter had asked for the files from Bush Sr., who was giving him his briefing as president-elect in 1977, and he'd asked for the UFO files. But he wasn't asking for the presidential UFO files because he had the top secret stuff. What he was asking for, and I contend, he was asking for the files for the people. He wanted the UFO files released to the public. And that's why George Bush had said to him, I can't give you that. Curiosity is not sufficient need. If you want that, you have to go to the House Senate, the House Science and Technology Committee. They wouldn't have the top secret files. They would have the files for the public. So he wanted this material out, and he did all sorts of things. He sent his press secretary to the FBI. He sent his science advisor to NASA. Carter did a lot of things to try to get the UFO thing out into the public. And one of the things he did was ask for this congressional research study through the House Science and Technology Committee. And Sheehan was involved in that because he was chief counsel to the Jesuits in Washington, D.C. And what they wanted him to do was to get the Vatican UFO files. And he knew the Jesuit who ran the Vatican Library. So he made a request to the Vatican Library, and they said, no, you can't have the UFO files. So he wrote a second letter on behalf of the Congressional Research Service and said, on behalf of the President of the United States, we are requesting the UFO files from the Vatican Library. And they wrote back and said, no, you can't have the files. So that was his initial involvement. And when he was asked to do this, he talked to Marcia Smith, who was running the program, and he said, in order to do this, I need to see the classified Blue Book files. That's when he saw the flying saucer, and he sketched the writing on the side of the flying saucer, and did all that sort of stuff. But that was basically his only involvement, except for lecturing to JPL, to the SETI people there. But that was basically his involvement. He was involved with Dennis Kucinich. And Dennis Kucinich, he introduced a general to Dennis Kucinich, who Dennis was really interested in UFOs. But as you remember, Dennis Kucinich was asked the question in the debate when he was running for president about the fact that he'd seen the UFO, and that ended his political career. I mean, he was gone after that. Nobody ever talked about him as being the crazy guy who saw the UFO. So, and Sheehan was an advisor to his committee, the same as he was an advisor to the guy who had the sex scandal, who should have won the Democrat. I can't remember what his name was.
Hart.
Hart. Yes, no, Hart. That was the earlier guy. This is a later guy. Hart was the first guy. This was Edwards.
Yeah, Edwards. Well, I was going to say they all are. They all are.
So Sheehan was a major advisor to Edwards, but at the one time that I heard him interviewed on it, he still hadn't talked to him about UFOs. It's a very sort of sensitive issue. So he's not directly involved. He's got this indirect thing, but he has no power inside the government to do it. In fact, he talks very sort of derogatorily about Obama and Obama having done it. He talks the same way I do, is about this belief system that you have the ultimate right wing and you have the left wing, or the people who are very sort of spiritual that believe this is all going to unravel. And you have to go through these patterns. We have to be sort of dragged through, he calls them the 7 paradigms. And that if you're a scientific guy who believes in the physical world and that there's nothing beyond the physical world, you're in the 3rd paradigm. And you can talk that guy till you're blue in the face. You're not going to change it. That gradually through history, we will move into those paradigms. And when you get to the 7th paradigm, the aliens will introduce the 8th paradigm, and we will move into disclosure. So he believes the same thing as me, that everything comes down to belief, and you're moving through these levels of belief, and that the aliens are moving us closer and closer to accepting this idea that there's extraterrestrial life, that consciousness is important, this sort of stuff. And we're moving away from the idea that it's a physical world and aliens can't get here and we're the center of the universe and we are all that is and we're the only intelligent life and all this kind of nonsense. We're just gradually being moved down that road.
Related to this, Grant, Paul Hellyer, a lot of your fellow Canadians have been tweeting about him. What else can that man do? He seems to tell us that, yes, he's seen top secret files, that show that the United States government knows about extraterrestrial and other visitors, but he doesn't want to release some other information. Do you know him? Can you get him to say more?
Well, no, he actually hasn't seen any files. He was a very powerful guy. He was Minister of Defense here in Canada, and he was Deputy Prime Minister. He was basically the Vice President under Prime Minister Trudeau in the late 60s. And when he was the defense guy in the Canadian government, he said there was UFO files that came, but that he basically wasn't interested. He was trying to put all the three, the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy into one service. He said that was all he was interested. He didn't see any real top secret stuff. He really didn't. Not that he didn't believe in it, but he wasn't really that interested. It wasn't until the Corso book came out when his son was working for this two-star general in the United States, and the two-star general said everything in the book about Corso is true and more, and he talked to the general, and the general said, yeah, it's all for real. That's when he suddenly got, saw the light and suddenly got into the UFO thing.
Yeah, let's make this really clear, Dino, and for everybody. Everything for Paul Hellyer was after the fact. He was retired. Yeah. He was out of the government. All of his research and his inquisitiveness came after the fact. It came post politics.
Have you seen a memo that said that it was somehow indirectly seen a U.S. Top secret or above top secret memo that mentioned spacecraft?
Well, there's the top secret memo that was written by his department. He was Minister of Transportation, and that's the top secret document I talked about at the beginning of the show, that the Canadians went to the Americans through the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., through military liaison, and they're on classified channels. They were told flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans. He's seen that document, but that document was declassified in 1978. Hellyer didn't get religious about UFOs until the 2000s. I'll actually tell you a very interesting story. Hellyer in 1967, when he was Deputy Prime Minister, when he was Defense Minister, actually opened a UFO landing base in St. Paul, Alberta. It was the 100th anniversary in Canada, and all these towns were building different things and centennial projects. And this one town decided they're going to build this UFO landing base. So Hellyer, as the Minister of Defense, comes to open this UFO landing base. And he makes this speech, and he in the speech he says, this isn't the first UFO landing base. The Canadian government opened up a Suffield, which was a top secret. It was like Area 51 in Canada. In 1954, they opened up a base for UFOs to land. Nothing ever landed, therefore UFOs don't exist. This was in his speech. So in the 1970s, I and another researcher started chasing Hellyer, and we were saying, well, you're missing something, Hellyer. You're telling about the base, and you're saying that all this sort of stuff is going on. How did the UFOs know where to land? You're saying the base was opened, and somebody inside the Canadian government had communication. We knew who that was. It was Wilbur Smith. But how did the UFOs know where to land? And he just said, well, I'll try to find my files. And he said there was a guy, an expert in the Defense Department, who had told him the story, that he really didn't know the story. So I caught him years later, and he actually got mad at me. We were in Washington, and he said to me, I may be many things, but I'm not a liar. And I said, because he had basically said the guy who told him the story about the UFO landing base, he couldn't remember the guy's name. And I said, on my website, I said, well, what's the chances of him not remembering the guy's name? I mean, this is totally impossible. He was the expert, and he couldn't remember the guy's name that had told him the story. Because we were trying to get out, where did this information come from? In 1954, that the Canadians had actually opened. And what happened was that the Canadian government, Wilbur Smith, the guy that was running the Canadian government program, had convinced the Canadian government that there was UFOs, and that if they would try to stop shooting them down, he would land it at Suffield, Alberta. And the agreement was made to land it at this top secret base, and he couldn't get the agreement, so he called off the landing. And the alien's name was Alpha. We know the whole story. Alpha was going to land. They couldn't get the guarantees, so Wilbur Smith calls it off. And this is where the story comes from. But then Hellyer tells me, he said, I didn't even write the speech. Someone wrote the speech. He was telling the truth. Somebody wrote the speech for him, talking about this UFO landing base. Then when we go to the government says, well, we have no information about Mr. Hellyer talking about this stuff, and the story dies. But Hellyer in 1967 actually confirmed that the Canadian government had opened a UFO base for UFOs to land. That was exactly the same year that Eisenhower had the encounter at Edwards Air Force Base, and it's exactly the same year that in Great Britain, the head of all the weapons for working for Prince Philip, the guy that ran the weapons, was visited, he said clearly, by an alien, that he had a contact with an alien. He'd gone back and told Prince Philip. They set up a second meeting with his alien, and the guy disappeared. So in this 1954, there was at least 3 major contacts to major governments by aliens. And you see this kind of pattern, but this is the kind of stuff that I'm trying to get public, that people don't know these stories. And when you start to see it, it all fits together.
Well, the one confirmation.
Have you ever had a Men in Black
hold on,
visit?
Dino, hold on. It's still my show, Dino. Dino's now the executive producer. So
okay, I will let you go.
no, Dino, stay with us. But the whole, this is a really good definition of irony with what I'm about to say. The only real confirmation that we had for MJ-12 came from Canada, and when we look at the 12 as a whole, the only official document that we have that is official that was released came from Canada, and that's the only official reference that we have coming back to us for the any validity of any of the government. Sometimes my tongue gets tied. For all of the MJ-12 documents.
Although I have written an article, and I published it again, because this keeps going through the thing that there's no evidence for MJ-12. I wrote an article, and I published it just in the last couple of days. I posted it again. I think it's on my website, presidentialufo.com, where I said, was there a control group? And I list about 12 different evidences that there was an MJ-12. I mean, there's the... John Alexander, who I don't know if you've been on your show, but John Alexander is like the government insider guy who's been in UFOs since 1947, who is the head of non-lethal weapons for the U.S. military, and he is confirmed. And I confronted him at the last UFO Congress because he had said it on the air, and then I said, "Confirm this for me." He said that somebody whispered in his ear, "Yes, it is true. There was an MJ-12." And this is like last year. He's confirmed this, and I said to him, "Who told you that?" And the guy said not only was there an MJ-12, but the names on the document from the MJ-12 document are accurate. So this is something that when people tell the MJ-12 story, they leave out this John Alexander thing. Mm-hmm. I had a guy inside the National Archives in Washington, D.C., who told me that the way they stored the document, his girlfriend was in these UFOs. He wasn't, but he heard about the MJ-12 document. He went and looked at the Cutler Twining memo that was connected to it, and he said the way they were protecting that Cutler Twining memo in there indicated to him this was for real. So he asked inside the vault, and he's the guy that declassified the documents, the black stuff out, and he said he just follows the rules. Whatever he's supposed to do, he does. He said he asked, and the one guy who had a Mexican name told him that, yes, he had seen documents, MJ-12, documents with MJ-12 on them from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I list about 12 different things. Dr. Eric Walker told us quite clearly. We talked to him a couple weeks after that document was released in 1987. He said, "I've known of them." Talking about MJ-12. I've known of them for 40 years.
Right.
Leave it alone. There's nothing you can do. You're up against the windmills. There is a lot of evidence for MJ-12. There's even one of the top aviation guys, I can't remember his name, Johnson, or he's one of the guys that was friends with Ben Rich, said he'd known about MJ-12 3 years before that document was released. He said it was common knowledge. He described there was a unit out of Turkey. He reported this Air Force base in Texas where they were reporting. There's a lot of evidence for MJ-12. There's not just the one document, but a lot of this stuff just sort of gets dumped like it was Bill Moore that had hoaxed the document and stuff like that.
Right.
And I say if you believe that, well, then get me Bill Moore's FBI file. There's 61 pages, and there's 57 are still refused. They will not refuse. They refused 57 pages of FBI file. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see Stanton Friedman's FBI file, which is almost all blacked out as well. They will not release Stanton Friedman's FBI file. There's something to this, and it's a lot more than people just leaking documents. They're leaking documents to get information out. They want you to know. It's like the aliens. They want you to know MJ-12 exists. They want you to know that there's a landing at Holloman Air Force Base. But they keep all the material. They leak it in phony documents because that's the way you control it. You can control who's telling the story. You get out the material because you can't have people back in 1947 believing there's nothing going on. You've got to gradually leak the story, but you've got to keep the story, the cover-up going, because once you spill the milk, you can't put it back in the jar.
You're listening to Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking to Grant Cameron live from Canada. And we have Dino with us, too, the new executive producer.
I just wanted to find out whether Men in Black visit people like you in Canada.
I have.
They're red. They're red. They're red in Canada.
This is an interesting thing. People always talk about the conspiracy thing, and they're out to get you. I even had a congressional aide who got upset at me 2 days ago and you got my life in jeopardy. You misquoted me. You get it wrong. Yeah, my life's in jeopardy. I've been tapped for 30 years. And she's a big name in Washington. She was very upset. In 40 years, I have never been threatened. I have never had a man in black experience. I have never been told what to say. And so when it comes to conspiracy thing, I always have problems. I think a lot of that is to sort of manipulate people or to move people in certain directions. The Men in Black thing, I have two. John Schuessler, who used to be the head of MUFON, who worked for NASA, I remember him telling me a Men in Black experience. And I'm telling you, when he told the story, I mean, it was like you could see the hair standing up on the back of his neck. This was not just some guy. This was the head of MUFON was telling this story about a Man in Black experience. He didn't know what it meant, but it was very direct and very bizarre. And I had a case of a guy here. He worked for an aerospace industry here, had a close encounter coming up from North Dakota on I-29, the big interstate coming up to the Canadian border. There was a UFO there, stalled out the car, move away, the car would start, stall, start, and he kept moving in and out and burnt out all the electrical inside the car. And he had to push the car across the border. He got home. He started to have Men in Black experiences when he was in Winnipeg. There's no doubt the Men in Black experiences take place. I don't think anybody has a real good handle on what's going on. It's a very bizarre experience, but there's no doubt.
Oh, your Canadian Dan Aykroyd had one in New York City.
Yeah. And so, there's no doubt these things are going on. And when you hear, that's the thing, and when you hear people tell them directly, like when I heard John Schuessler directly tell me that story, which I don't know if he's ever told anybody else, I mean, you could tell he was not making this up. This was for real, and it really disturbed him as to what had happened.
Well, you've also had, I would love for you to share this story or stories, trouble with customs and traveling.
Yeah. That's sort of, I think, sort of misinterpreted. I was actually going to Los Angeles, and I had gone through Vancouver. My connection flight was in Vancouver, and Vancouver is where the Air India jet flew out of the 747. This is about 20 years ago, and the Sikhs had put a bomb on it, and it exploded, and there was 350 people killed over the ocean and this sort of stuff. So it's a very high secure airport. And I was going through there, and I basically talked about, the fact that I was going to lecture in Los Angeles, and it was a $150 honorarium, and I gave them all the information, all this sort of stuff. And then the guy said to me, he said, well, you can't lecture in the States, and you're stealing American jobs. I said, it's like a $150 honorarium. I mean, you got to have like 20 years experience to do this. And he said, I said, professors do it all the time. They go, because I worked at a university for 40 years. I said, professors do it all the time. They go across and give one lecture, whatever. He said, you're not a professor. Don't even go there. And then he sort of disappeared in the back, and he came out, and he handed me this thing. And I've got it. I can see it right now. I got it hanging on my wall. And it said, you've been refused entry to the United States of America. You don't have the proper visa for working in the United States. And so then he just handed it to me, and then he turned around and he started talking to this other guy, and they were laughing and whatever. And I stood there, and I'm waiting for him. And then I said, so what do I do now? And he said, I don't care what you do. Go back where you came from. And I went, wow. So I walked out of the room. And then somebody led me downstairs into the thing, and I went to Air Canada to get back on the flight going back home. And it was then I was screened for my computer. And my computer came up positive for explosives. And I went, oh, this has got to be a setup, man. This is unreal. And there's like the 20 questions again. And when was the last time you touched explosives and all this sort of stuff? And I sent the computer away a couple days before, and the hard drive had been changed. And I guess they had used some sort of solvent to clean the computer. But basically, when I interpreted it, was basically the fact that the customs is that way. It's like the guy's having a bad day, he had a fight with his boyfriend or whatever. I don't know. And he just was having a bad day, and it was my pick that you're not going across because you're going to make $150. And I was screened very heavily for 2 years. I would go in the one-way room with the glass, and they would go through the car, and it would come up on the screen, and they'd call supervisors and stuff like that. And so for 2 years it went on, and then it sort of stopped. But now I don't take honorarium. So when I speak in the United States, basically I speak on my own behalf. I pay a lot of my own expenses and stuff. And people will say, well, just tell them you're going on holidays. And I always say,
yeah, exactly.
If I tell them that I'm going on holidays. If I lie at the border, why should you believe anything when I come to lecture?
Well, look, I used to travel a lot to Canada. I mean, a lot on business. And the first time, and I was warned by my Canadian counterparts, my handlers on the other side.
Yeah.
Jimmy, when you go through customs, just go, tell them you're visiting. Tell them you're visiting. Well, I just kind of spaced it. It was my first time, and I'm in customs. And so what are you doing up here? I'm speaking. Where? Well, I'm speaking at a convention. What are you going to speak about? Are you being paid? Yeah, I'm up here on business. I got drilled. Now, coming back across or going back to Canada every time through. So what are you doing up here? I'm just hanging out. Oh, okay. And went straight through. I never once said I was there on business after that. But, okay, hold on. Wanted to back up. I've got about 10 tweets in a row and a couple of emails. What did he say about Stanton Friedman? What? Okay. So they want some clarification.
Stanton was the guy who forced this top secret document out. What happened with the top secret document was the Canadian government had the files, and we're the first. You always hear the story about the British released their files and the Canadian. Nobody in the world has released their files. Everybody's releasing sighting reports. The top secret, that stuff, nobody's releasing. So people are releasing sighting reports. In 1978, the Canadians released all the sighting reports, and this top secret document happened to be in there. We knew it was there because Wilbur Smith, who was in charge of writing that document, was very open about the fact that he was in contact with aliens, that he was going to have this landing base, and he wrote all this sort of stuff. And when he was dying of cancer of the lower bowel. He told his wife, and I interviewed his wife after he died in 1962. I interviewed his wife in the mid-'70s. She said, Wilbur told me that when I die, the Russians, the Americans, and the Canadians are all going to come looking for my files, and you are not to give them to anybody. So when they came, she said exactly what happened. He died. He started coming for the files. She said, I destroyed the files. I don't have them. She said they started breaking into the house. You could tell they were looking for something. They didn't take anything, but the house, she had moved it to her oldest son's house. So anyway, we knew because there was a draft copy of the top secret memo in his files. So the guy who held the files, who was a Navy guy during the 70s and before the documents came, knew the top secret memo was in there. And he was trying to force these documents out to get this top secret document made public, because the official one that had all the stamps on it was in the file. And Stanton Friedman helped force those documents. So in 78, Stanton and a guy by the name of, actually changed his name to Mr. X, and this researcher from Ottawa forced the Canadian government to release all these documents, and they made the mistake. They left this document in there. And there was another document from 1967 that said that the document should not be destroyed until the subject has cooled off. And that document leaked as well. So we have these two very incriminating documents, but they really haven't gone anywhere. We all know about them. I talk about them all the time. But when people say there's no evidence, I say, what do you mean there's no evidence? The Canadian government said officially, U.S. officials, not people on the street, U.S. officials have stated flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States, rated 2 points higher than the hydrogen bomb. This is 1950. The hydrogen bomb would not be detonated until 1952. It was 2 points higher than the hydrogen bomb. We found the guy that provided the material. We have all the documents from the Canadian Embassy where they're talking back and forth about they're basically waiting for the Americans to make a statement. They said, have the Americans made a statement? Because they figure the Americans are about to declare that they've got a crash flying saucer. And then the documents sort of peter out. But we have a lot of material, and people will say there's no evidence. The Canadian government has officially said flying saucers exist. It's in a top secret document, and the Canadian government does not deny that document exists.
What about Stanton Friedman's FBI file that you mentioned? What did you mean by that?
Well, the FBI file, he filed for because he was involved in the MJ-12 document. So they were working, these were big researchers. Like Bill Moore was the biggest at the time in Stanton. They were the two biggest researchers. And they were the ones working on the MJ-12 document. They were doing all this background on it. They didn't want to release the document, but because it was released in Britain, they were forced to release the document. They were working on this sort of stuff. And they were filing a lot of FOIAs, and they both filed for their FBI file. And both of them got back a couple of pages, and they went through appeal and were not able to get their FBI file. And both of them, I think, are missing 60 pages, and they're at a secret level. So whatever they have in a file, I mean, Bill Moore was a school teacher. Like, why have they got 60-some pages on him? Stanton Friedman was just a UFO researcher. They have secret, classified FBI files that the FBI refuses to release. And these are from the age 87, 88, when they were doing the MJ-12 document. The government will not release the FBI file.
That's interesting. You know what, though? I wouldn't want to see mine. I'm sure they have. To be honest with you.
I would.
No, you don't, Dino. Hey, I have a couple of questions really quick that came in. Let's make these answers really short if you can. What do you think about experiencers and contactees' ethnic groups? Is there one prevalent group?
I'm not too sure.
Okay.
No, I've heard the whole thing about the native connection and the Celtic connection. No, I think a lot of it's got more to do with if you're looking for blood types. I think you're going to hit more, and all experiencers. Roger Lear, who had now passed away, said the common experience that he found in all abductees and experiencers, and this goes to the consciousness thing, all abductees and experiencers are right-brained, creative people.
Steve just tweeted. He says the men in black are afraid of Grant. They know that he'll talk them to death.
And I won't keep any secrets. I'll tell everybody.
Okay, next. What about the Nordic alien interaction with the USA and Canada in the 1950s?
Wilbur Smith was in contact with the human types, which would be the Nordics, little people. His son, I've got it on tape. His son said, just before Wilbur died, he knew he was dying. He went to him and he said, "Dad, is it true? Did you actually see something?" And he said, "Yeah, they can't touch me anymore. I did. I was shown a flying saucer outside of Washington, D.C. We think it was Langley, didn't say where it was. And I was shown the bodies. And I said to Jim, his oldest son, I said, what were they? Because this is 1950s, you got to remember. I said, were they grays? And he said, no, as far as I know. My father didn't say grays. He said, they looked like us. That Wilbur Smith said, if I saw them on the street, you wouldn't know who they are. I would recognize them, but they would pass on the street. So in the 1950s, Wilbur Smith, at least the Canadians, were dealing with human-type alien beings that could pass on the street.
Interesting. I keep hearing that over and over. I do. I keep hearing that over and over, not only with contactees, but other researchers that they have done. And we went through you remember this, Dino, don't you? Maybe 3 months ago, probably 3-4 nights a week on the show. For a few weeks in a row. It seemed like every guest, every contactee, everybody that we talked to brought up beautiful people, perfect people. You remember that, Dino?
Yeah, I think I saw one at Trader Joe's today.
But I'm pumped.
I think the beautiful people of the Nordics are more the contactee types, where it's not abduction type stuff. The abduction seems to be more reptilians, greys, praying mantis type things. The Nordics would seem to be more like the nice guys who come and take you for a ride on the flying saucers, give you messages, all this kind of stuff.
Okay, I can't let you get away. Hold on, Dino. We've got literally 5 minutes left, and thank you, Grant, for hanging on for an extra 15, 20 minutes tonight. Okay, all of these answers, let's keep them real short because I'm going to do it rapid fire. Our presidents, when they are elected, first day they go in, the president's book of secrets is slapped in front of them, and their advisors are there. Everything is there. Are they exposed at that point to the existence of ET or not?
I believe they are, yes, absolutely. The president is the head of state. If you're going to deal with another foreign power, aliens, Russians, Canadians, the head of state is the only person that can negotiate. The president is the head of state. He's the chief executive officer of the government. He's the head of the intelligence. He's the commander-in-chief of the military. He is the top of every pyramid. Yes, he knows. It's just simply classified. He can't talk about it.
Barack Obama, alien or not? Just kidding. Barack Obama, what does he know?
He knows. He said in Roswell, New Mexico, he said, the question I'm asked most by 9 and 10-year-old kids is, what about Roswell? Is it true what they say? He said, we'll keep our secrets here. That means he knows. If Barack Obama, the most left-wing president ever down the pike, knows, everybody knows.
George Bush Jr., what does he know?
George Bush Jr. was asked. I have a friend who asked him. He's simply replied, ask Cheney.
George Bush Jr., alien or not? Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay,
Could
so
be. Yeah.
yeah, could be. Now we've talked about Bill, so we can keep this kind of short. Does Bill know? We've discussed this
Absolutely.
5 times tonight, but
Absolutely.
he does.
Yeah, there's even a report. He was briefed. He was taken to Los Alamos, 1994. There's lots of stories about him being briefed. The president has to know. You can. I mean, if the president didn't know, you'd have mass defection at the top level. The reason it holds together is because the people around him believe they're doing the right thing. If everybody believed that the president wasn't in charge and that there was some crazy bunch running the country, you'd have people defecting. There's no defections, which means they believe they're doing the right thing.
And what
They
about
believe
the?
even Walker told us. Let me because Walker said to us, "Why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity?" When he said that in 1990, it meant there are rules. They're all playing by the rules. They believe that they're doing the right thing.
What about the vice presidents? Are they exposed too as well?
Some of them, Cheney for sure. Bush or Gore, his 2 daughters were supposed to be contactees. Believe that he knew. Yes, I think they've given some. It's not everything that they're given, but they are basically in the loop. They're given the classified briefing, I believe, yes.
And Bush Sr., the answer would be yes before I ask you the question, because he was in the CIA, before he was a sitting president. He was a vice president before that with Reagan. Man, my memory is, I am right on that. Yeah, he was Reagan's vice president. But before that, he was the CIA. So I'm assuming he knows about E.T.
He was one of the ones that my friend talked to, and then he got mad at me for making it public. Talked to him about the Holloman Air Force Base film. That one of the things that the president has shown during the briefing is the official Holloman Air Force Base film in 1971 or whenever it was taken, where the aliens land and they get out and they're greeted by Holloman Air Force Base officials and stuff like that. And Bush said, "Yes, I was shown the film as CIA director, but not as vice president or president. It wasn't part of my presidential briefing." Jimmy Carter was shown that film. Gerald Ford admitted that he was shown the film, and George Bush Sr. said he can confirm it was not an A-12, and he can confirm it was not a psychological test for people. It was a film, but he wouldn't say what was on the film. But that's one of the rumored stories, is that the Holloman Air Force Base landing film is shown to the president. That's part of the briefing.
Now, this is a little off subject, but I want to get to this really quick. Did Emmenegger ever see that film? I mean,
he's told me that he saw pieces. He saw frames of the film.
Right? Did he ever?
That's the thing. That's where he starts to dance when you ask him about the film.
Yeah.
The other thing that he has is the 8 seconds of film. You know that story. There's
Yes.
8 seconds of the film, and I asked him. I said, "You told me they took the film back," and he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Well, there's 8 seconds of film in there." I said, "Where did that come from?" He said, "Well, that was just background. It didn't show anything." And I said, "But it came from the film. So, how did this happen?" And that's the key, was they were given 8 seconds of the film. This was this gradual disclosure thing.
Right.
And what he said, it didn't show anything. It didn't show the craft up close, and it didn't show the aliens. That's the classified part. That's all classified. They can show the thing coming over the hill like it did, but they were actually given 8 seconds of that film. And whether he saw it, I think there's a chance he saw it.
When I read his original book that he wrote, and when that book came out, it was before modern ufology, and it was an interesting series of events through that timeline, through the early 70s, and how he was contacted, and you remember they were going to do like a road show or something across the United, some kind of expo, and I really want to believe Emmenegger, but when it always comes down to the nuts and bolts question, he does the dance. And
on the two questions, on the 8 seconds and on whether he saw the film.
Yes.
That's where he.
Well, that's the question. That's the $1 million question right there.
But they do have another top secret film. You know that.
Yes. There was 3. There was
trying to get hold of.
Right.
That was the one with the launch. Where the UFOs come around the launch.
Yep.
And they launch the missile. That one they have, and that one it's in Alan Sandler's vault. And they said, well, they wanted $25,000 to see the film and this sort of stuff. And they have it. And it was given. It's got top secret on the canister.
Right.
And it was one of the films they didn't give back.
Nixon and Jackie Gleason. Did it happen?
I think it happened. We interviewed Beverly Gleason, his second wife, and she said it either happened or he was running around with a woman. She said he was very shaken when he came home that night. And a lot of people said Nixon couldn't get away from his security. I produce on my website, a story of him getting away with the kitchen guy gets him underneath a blanket out the back seat, and they have to drag him out of a bar in Washington, D.C. So that confirmed to me that Nixon could get away. And the whole story, I think, is true, that they were very close, and that Holloman, Nixon would go to the Southern White House, and every time he would go to the Southern White House, he'd land at the base. I can't remember the name of the base.
Yeah, right there outside.
Yeah, and then he would take the helicopter to Key Biscayne to the house. So he was at that base like 100 times during his presidency, and that's where he showed the body. So a lot of the stuff makes sense. But again, it's the old story. It was like there were stories about him having, I heard from a high-level source that he had pictures of aliens in his filing cabinet that he would show certain people. But the thing is, how do you confirm this kind of stuff? You hear these stories, and it's hard to confirm this stuff.
John F. Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe, FBI document. Real?
I doubt all that stuff.
You do?
I very much doubt all that stuff.
Really? I'm on the other side
of
the fence on that one. I think that's a real document.
I
do.
The document they showed that it was sort of taken from. It may be a true story, but I don't believe there are any legitimate documents, MJ-12, any of them, because you can't release a legitimate document because that's the end of the cover-up if somebody confirms it. So the way you do the disclosure is if you want MJ-12 out, if you want the idea about sharing stuff with the Russians, is you put out a document and you change it. And then you can always say it's a hoax. You can change one word in the document or whatever. So I believe all the documents are hoaxes, every single one of them. But it doesn't mean that they're useless. It means they're telling you a story. And that's the way they tell the story. You can never release the cover-up. You can never give a legitimate document. You're always going to use this sort of half-true, half-false type thing. That's how they do it in intelligence. That's how they get the stories out. And they let the story circulate around. And just like the Area 51 thing, that was a setup. Bob Lazar was set up to go in there. He didn't have the proper security clearances to go in there. They knew his background wasn't, but they knew he was going to talk. He was talking to John Lear before he went in there.
Right.
John Lear confirmed that. And so they knew he was going to go to John Lear. And the second day he was there, he went to John Lear, and John Lear tells a story. He said, "What the hell are you doing here? Go back. What are you telling me? You know they're going to be watching you." And it was a setup. Because John Lear was running around talking about underground bases and aliens, fights, and all this kind of stuff. And he was run for Senate, and his father was a big Lear guy, big name. He's a big name, and they knew John Lear was going to spread the story. So they put these stories, and they didn't realize that George Knapp was going to get a hold of Area 51 story, get 25 other witnesses, and blow this thing wide open, and they would have to suddenly move everything out of Area 51. They figured the story would die like everything else, and it didn't die. It was a setup to get out the idea that they had a live alien at Area 51, and the fact that they were back engineering saucers, it just sort of backfired on them. But this is what they do. They're releasing this story bit by bit, but they won't use any legitimate stuff to do it. It's all done through this sort of back door of disinformation.
Thank you, Grant Cameron. Hold on. We got to go. I got to roll credits.
Well, there's an umbrella question that this brings
can't.
up. Is there a breakaway society? And do they have the underwater base off Malibu?
Dino, you know I love you. I'm rolling credits right now. Hey, thank you, Grant. Grant will be here in L.A. this Saturday at 0. Come check him out. I will be there. Come hang out with us, and we'll be asking questions to that audience. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Dino.
Good night.
Good night, guys. I got to roll, man. Wow. Up again. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That was just amazing. Dino, everybody on Twitter tonight. Fantastic evening. Thank you, Grant Cameron. All of you Fadernauts, the family, Dino. Stay tuned. Coming up next is After Hours AM. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black is produced by Rita Kamurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Mark D. Kovar. Special thanks to Les Johnson III. Special graphics and show graphics and logo by Method of Signaling. The announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Bateau, and Mark D. Kovar. Music is by Doug Aldrich. Show intros performed by Spaceboy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your humble host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night is Fader Night. Behave. See ya.